Chapter 7 Chapter 36 to 39. A year passed quietly, marking the beginning of events that would change everything. In the heart of Siberia, during the winter solstice, the land was barren and blanketed in white. The wind and snow swept across the endless ice, burying all traces beneath a layer of pure, biting cold. Snow whipped through the air as fierce winds howled over the vast frozen expanse. On top of a towering iceberg, several figures stood braced against the storm, their thick scarves flapping wildly in the gusts. One of the taller figures, a woman with a delicate and beautiful face partially hidden beneath a gray velvet hat, stared intently at the ice ahead. "What are we waiting for?" she asked. Beside her stood a man wrapped in a heavy down jacket, his blue hair standing out in stark contrast to the snowy landscape. Strong and broad-shouldered, he held onto his hat, shielding it from the wind. Confused, he shouted over the howling storm, "What's going on?" "We're waiting for him," the woman said, glancing at the man and his companion before pointing ahead with a smirk. The blue-haired man exchanged a puzzled look with his companion, following her gesture. All they saw was the vast expanse of ice. Just as the man was about to say something, the ground trembled violently, shaking the ice for kilometers around. Wind, snow, and gravel swirled as the ice cracked. Suddenly, there was a deafening explosion. Boom! The ice in the direction the woman had pointed shattered, and from the depths of an icy cavern, a blinding golden torrent shot into the sky. The dazzling light surged like molten gold, painting the heavens in brilliant streaks. The sky turned into a glowing river of yellow as the golden light overwhelmed everything. The wind and snow halted, and an oppressive, terrifying aura radiated from the explosion, engulfing the entire landscape. The once white world was now bathed in hues of gold and red. The overwhelming force crushed the man and his companion, their faces drained of color. It felt as if a godlike presence sat high above them, its oppressive power weighing down on their souls. The sheer terror filled their hearts, and under the crushing pressure, their minds began to fade. Consciousness blurred, teetering on the edge of collapse. They endured the mental strain and looked up. The golden sky seemed torn apart by the terrifying power that had just been unleashed. "What is this?" The blue-haired man, looking like a beast in human form, muttered in disbelief. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, warning him that this place was like the very abyss of death. The woman beside him, who had been trying to keep her composure, couldn't help but smile despite her own apprehension. "Isn't the person you're waiting for right there?" she said. Boom! A torrent of gold erupted from the ice cave, spewing thousands of golden particles like meteors racing toward them. The man in ray quartz glasses instinctively prepared to attack, but something deep inside told him to hold back. In the blink of an eye, the golden particles gathered in midair, forming a human figure in front of them. Standing tall at 1.85 meters, the man had a flawless, athletic physique. His sharp, hawk-like eyes glowed with a streak of red lightning, and his handsome, mature face seemed out of place for his age. He wore only a white vest that hugged his muscular frame. The woman tossed him a red coat, which he caught effortlessly and draped over himself with elegance. Slowly, the figure descended from the sky to stand before them. "It's great to meet you, Hank, Scott," the man said, his voice slightly magnetic. "And I'm even more excited for the surprise." As his words echoed, the blinding golden light in the sky faded, and the heavy snow resumed its fall. The man was Leon, and the woman was Wanda. Cyclops, Scott Summers, and Hank McCoy still looked stunned. Scott, usually seen as the best leader by Professor Xavier, was speechless. "I finally understand how you managed to penetrate Stryker's base so easily," Scott said. Hank nodded in agreement. A year ago, Leon had downloaded human experiment data from Stryker's base, which had significantly improved the situation for mutants. In response, Hank had worked hard to build a plane that met Leon's requirements. However, they hadn't expected to witness such a powerful display when they delivered it. Both of them had even begun to question whether Leon might be a mutant himself. His abilities were so far beyond what they imagined, making his actions seem almost impossible for a human. His courage and poise were unlike anything they had ever seen, not even in someone as formidable as Magneto. While Magneto's power was undeniable, he never wielded it with such control or calm. The good news was that Leon's terrifying strength seemed free of malice. He didn't hide his power, which made them feel, at least for now, that they weren't facing an enemy. Leon exhaled slowly, the earlier dominant aura replaced by a calm gentleness. His tone was almost lighthearted as he said, "I'm looking forward to the work of this century's greatest inventor." On the endless, windswept snowy road, Leon and his group appeared as small as ants in the vast, white world. As they marched forward, Leon led the way, with a sleek black fighter jet parked 1,000 meters ahead on the icy plain. The jet, though not overly large, had a streamlined metal shell that exuded futuristic technology. The hatch lowered, and they all boarded the aircraft. Hank, regaining his confidence, began introducing the jet to Leon and Wanda. "This fighter is powered by a turbine engine and designed for maximum acceleration in a short time," Hank explained. "It's equipped with anti-gravity vertical takeoff and landing technology, optical stealth, and radar shielding features. This allows it to evade tracking from military satellites and radar worldwide." He continued, "Its speed can reach up to Mach 3, and it can fly at altitudes that break through the atmosphere. For that reason, the cabin has an oxygen system and space suits. The interior can comfortably accommodate 20 to 30 people. Even Wanda, who wasn't particularly interested in technology, widened her eyes in amazement at Hank's detailed introduction. Hank's introduction of the fighter plane made it clear that it surpassed any other known aircraft in terms of capability and design. The only downside, the immense cost of operating it. Luckily, with Leon's resources $3 billion and some of Dreykov's gray industry assets, he could easily cover the maintenance expenses of this remarkable machine. Leon was thoroughly satisfied with the fighter. It would save him a lot of trouble. As for concerns about breaking any country's laws, that wasn't even on his radar. Laws, after all, tend to restrict those who can't break the system. But for those with real power, the law is a suggestion, not a limit. While Leon might not have political authority, his strength gave him all the power he needed. After a year of relentless training, mastering the abilities of the glint fruit and honing his hockey skills, he was more powerful than ever. With this kind of combat strength, he had the confidence to challenge the world's top powers, including the United States. The fighter plane came equipped with an auxiliary pilot function, making it easy to fly. Under Hank's guidance, Leon and Wanda quickly mastered the controls and took off, heading towards the Ural Mountains. Through the window, the vast snowy landscape stretched out below, an endless expanse of frost and desolation. Upon landing in the Ural Mountains, Hank and the others disembarked. Leon had thoughtfully arranged a cheap second-hand pickup truck and a map for Hank, and the two drove toward the nearest city, leaving the cold, empty road behind. As for how Hank and his companion would return to New York, that wasn't Leon's concern. Flying the plane back to their wooden villa, they slowly descended to the open ground nearby. The landing immediately caught the attention of Sergei, Natasha, and the others, who had already noticed the plane's arrival. Over the past year, the children had matured considerably. Regular training had filled them with energy, and even in the cold wind and snow, they emerged wearing only thin clothes, full of life. They eagerly approached the fighter, admiration in their eyes. The boys crowded around as the hatch opened, pouring in with excitement. They inspected every corner of the plane, though they were sensible enough not to touch the strange buttons. "Cool, what a sleek plane," one of them marveled. "The space is huge. I hope everyone from the family has their very own private jet in the future," another joked. "With this plane, does it mean we won't need passports or have to rent smuggled cars from the black market?" Someone asked. "I bet flying this would be incredible," another added. The chatter filled the air, especially from the mischievous Pietro, who was zipping around at high speed, even inspecting the plane's engine nozzle. Meanwhile, Natasha remained the calmest of the group, making her way directly to the cockpit. Leon handed the airplane manual that Hank had prepared to Natasha. After flipping through it for a while, she was impressed by the aircraft's advanced and comprehensive features. "Hank is really talented," she said. "It took him just a year to build something like this." "He's an incredible scientist," Leon agreed. "If he weren't a mutant, he'd probably be world famous under a different name." "That's the harsh reality of this world," Natasha replied, as Leon and Wanda turned to watch the others exploring the plane's cabin. Leon turned to Natasha. "I'll leave it to you, Natasha. Make sure they all learn how to fly this thing." As Leon walked away, Natasha raised an eyebrow at Wanda. "He seems in unusually high spirits." "I noticed it too, back on the ice," Wanda replied. "Is it just because of the plane?" Natasha asked. "You know him better than that. A fighter jet isn't enough to make him this excited. Even when he escaped the test facility, I never saw him this way," Wanda shrugged. Natasha nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe there's something we don't understand about him." "Yeah, there's something deeper inside him that we're not seeing," Wanda agreed. Natasha and Wanda, ever observant, noticed the subtle shift in Leon's demeanor, though he didn't seem aware of it. His focus was entirely on his sign-in system. After accumulating more than 700 days of check-ins, he was eager to see what kind of reward awaited him. Instead of heading straight back to the wooden villa, Leon made his way deep into the Ural Mountains, to the secluded training ground he often used. Standing on an open expanse of ice, with heavy snow falling around him, he concentrated on the virtual screen only he could see. "Sign-in has been accumulated for 748 days. Would you like to start signing in?" With a soft ding, the system responded, "Sign-in successful. You've received the reward, Skyblade number 7, currently located in the Merlot star." Leon's eyes widened in shock. Skyblade No. 7, a space battleship, wasn't what he had expected after 2 years of sign-ins. His emotions were mixed, part surprise, part excitement, and perhaps a touch of disappointment. Yet, having one of the Skyblade series battleships, a powerful technological marvel, was undeniably an asset. It was an invaluable tool in his hands, something that could potentially change the course of the future. "Sorry about putting this right here, but I need to give you guys the info." Info and abilities. The Skyblade number 7 is an OP space battleship from the series Transcend the Gods, the Black Troop. This series is quite popular in China. Since there isn't an official English translation, I've come up with my own names for everything. Abilities. It's basically the ultimate skill Wisdom King Raphael, but as a space battleship. Analyzing magic. Making super soldier serum, taking genes of other species and becoming stronger by utilizing it like Hashirama cells, the battleship can do all. It's got something like an AI. And for those who aren't satisfied and think it's something weak, I'll give you a spoiler below. Blood bitch slapped Dormammu back to his fucking dimension with an attacking mechanism of the battleship lol. Thanks for understanding. As the pinnacle of angelic civilization, developed over countless billions of years, the Sky Blade series battleships represent th. height of technology. Few vessels in the universe could compare to their power and sophistication. But for Leon, Sky Blade number 7 wasn't enough. He craved more. Why can't I get the entire Merlot star itself, the heart of the angel civilization, from the sign-in? The complete Merlot star, after all, was the true center of angelic power. Ding. A cold, ethereal voice echoed in Leon's mind, positioning complete. Leon, person with the highest authority. Leon narrowed his eyes. Open the wormhole and send me to Sky Blade No. 7. The wormhole is open. Whoosh. As soon as the voice finished, ripples surrounded Leon, and in an instant, he vanished. The next moment, a bright light filled his vision, and he found himself standing in a stunning, majestic hall. It was a place of such beauty and artistry that it seemed impossible for humans to have crafted it. The smooth floor gleamed, and a long red carpet stretched from the entrance to a grand staircase leading to a throne. 4 intricately carved stone pillars supported the hall, and the entire space was bathed in radiant light. Whoosh! As Leon admired the hall, a beautiful, ethereal figure appeared before him. She was breathtakingly gorgeous, her beauty beyond words. Her long golden hair cascaded down her slender neck, and she wore gleaming silver armor that barely contained her large chest. Sacred white wings spread from her back, and she donned a red skirt with silver combat boots on her legs. She glowed with a holy light. Upon seeing Leon, the angel immediately placed her right fist over her chest in a salute, her red lips parting to deliver a melodic, ethereal greeting. Welcome, Captain Leon. Leon stared at her, slightly hesitant. And you are? My name is Keisha, a fragment of memory data from the original captain of Sky Blade number 7, here to assist the new captain, Keisha explained. Although she called herself memory data, her eyes and subtle expressions made her seem almost alive, more like a real person than just a simulation. Leon recalled that Keisha had been a high-ranking angel, with over 15,000 years of history. He knew better than to underestimate her. He went straight to the point, asking the question that mattered most to him. Are there any other angelic genes or memory data in the Sky Blade's database? None, Keisha replied. Leon was a bit disappointed, but he quickly moved on. I need a detailed explanation of all the functions of Sky Blade No. 7. Without hesitation, Keisha responded softly, the memories are ready to be linked. Do you accept them? Accept. Leon said immediately. Wang. A flood of memories surged into Leon's mind. Thankfully, his strong mental will shielded him from any pain or discomfort. Instead, he quickly absorbed the information. Sky Blade number 7 was a cutting-edge weapon of the angel civilization, a marvel of their advanced technology. Sky Blade number 7 is equipped with incredibly powerful strike capabilities. Its lower blade alone can easily split a planet in two. In Earth terms, it's like a celestial computer with immense computational power. This allows it to locate and track targets across multiple galaxies effortlessly. On both sides of the ship are dense sky windows, which act as crossing points between distant worlds. The ship's built-in engine can unleash devastating forces, such as triggering solar winds, capable of wiping out even the strongest opponents. However, this requires an enormous amount of energy, which the Sky Blade can only absorb through dark energy from the universe. As a result, this massive destructive power has a cooldown period between uses. One limitation Leon faces is that, while he has full command over Sky Blade number 7, he lacks the angelic gene to fully connect with the ship's engine. Angels, like Angel Yan, can use this connection to enhance their combat abilities, but Leon cannot tap into that potential directly. Fortunately, the ship can still provide long-distance support. Through a specialized algorithm connection, Leon can control advanced Earth technology, using the power of his glint fruit as a driving force. For example, he can perform a technique called flare bombing, which harnesses Young Technology's firepower to devastating effect. In essence, Leon, with his Admiral-level combat abilities, can leverage the support of Sky Blade number 7 to launch attacks that could obliterate Earth's surface. With external help from the ship, he even has the power to destroy planets. It's a pity that Sky Blade number 7 doesn't contain the memory or genetic data of other angels. Otherwise, Leon could have potentially resurrected those powerful and beautiful beings. But fortunately, Leon isn't that greedy. For now, Sky Blade number 7 is more than enough to satisfy him. Still, he can't help but think that maybe, one day, he'll sign in and get Merlot star itself. Who knows, perhaps a beautiful angel army will be his in the future. He. Of course, this was just Leon's wishful thinking. After all, what man could resist the idea of commanding an army of powerful and beautiful angelic warriors? It would be like heaven. Leon, being human, wasn't above such fantasies. But now that he fully understood the immense power of Sky Blade number 7, his original plans had to evolve. Thanks to the sign-in system, he had spent years evading enemies with Wanda and the group of children he had rescued, working tirelessly to build a home in the Ural Mountains. He started from nothing, using the breathing technique to nurture and train them. Now he had a house, a car, a private jet and even a battleship. With such power at his disposal, Leon realized his need for secrecy could be lessened, though his ultimate goal remained unchanged. He was still on the path to becoming a god. In fact, he now had the resources to compete with the gods themselves. Though in his opinion, it wasn't much, but it was something. Leon strolled out of the Grand Hall in a good mood, with Keisha following him like a loyal guardian angel. Though the Sky Blade was a battleship, it was much more than a mere weapon. It was also a sanctuary for angels, who infused beauty into every aspect of life. The ship itself resembled a cross, with immense skylight wings stretching from its sides. Between them lay a vast, magnificent city. Its architecture was breathtakingly imaginative, like something out of a dream. Castle-like structures seamlessly blended with roads, parks, mountains, rivers, waterfalls, and fields of flowers, creating a unique and self-sustaining ecosystem. There were birds, butterflies, and other creatures so lifelike, even in the harshest corners of space, this environment could flourish on its own. The city had its own day and night cycles, and living here felt like being immersed in the beauty of nature itself. Standing at the top of the steps outside the main hall, gazing at the mesmerizing city before him, Leon felt a sense of awe. Angels were indeed artists, embedding beauty into everything they touched. This wasn't just a human concept of beauty, it was a universal one, something any race or civilization could appreciate. He couldn't help but be intoxicated by the sight. It's hard to imagine just how spectacular and beautiful Sky Blade truly is, Leon murmured, taking in the sight. Keisha stood silently beside him, her eyes shimmering. Keisha, use Sky Blade to gather information on this universe, but keep it hidden. We can't risk exposure, Leon instructed. Yes, Captain, Keisha responded promptly. Leon's gaze deepened. The Sky Blade battleships were at the pinnacle of science and technology in this universe. If the top civilizations discovered them, they would undoubtedly attempt to steal or destroy them. Each of those civilizations had strength beyond imagination. Leon wasn't arrogant enough to think one Sky Blade could stand against the entire universe. After giving his instructions, Leon focused his mind. Activating the wormhole technology, he returned to his original spot deep in the Ural Mountains. He glanced around, now equipped with one of the Angel's basic abilities, the Eye of Insight, courtesy of the celestial computer. This ability allowed him to perceive information on the dark plane, revealing details at the genetic level about his surroundings. Only people or gods of immense power could interfere with the Eye of Insight. The entire landscape of the Ural Mountains became clear in his mind. Looking up, he spotted a plane flying 30,000 feet above. Instantly, he could access all the information from the captain to the flight attendants, and even the passengers. If he wanted to, Leon could easily lock onto the aircraft and control it through Sky Blade number 7, crashing it on the spot. In that moment, he fully grasped just how primitive the technology of lower civilizations was compared to the angelic civilization. A single thought could send humanity's technological advancements back to the Stone Age. It was like comparing an ant to an elephant. He gave a brief moment of silence for human civilization, then quickly adjusted his mindset. After all, he was the elephant now. In high spirits, Leon transformed into golden particles and reappeared at the wooden villa. Inside, it was lively. Alina sat with Clarice, who had finally emerged from her dark mood, and a few others on the sofa watching anime on a tablet. The kids huddled together, their cheeks pressing against each other, occasionally making sounds of excitement. Others were watching TV, playing billiards, showing off their skills, or sparring in a corner. The villa itself had been expanded significantly, now covering over 1,000 square meters, more than enough space for the large family. Two playful little sables darted around the room, running straight into Leon's legs as he entered. The small creatures bumped their heads, but upon seeing him, they squeaked and quickly scurried up his pants, settling on his shoulders and rubbing their soft, furry heads against his cheeks. They were irresistibly cute. Leon casually petted them for a moment, greeting everyone as he made his way to the fridge. Grabbing a cold drink, he sat down on the sofa, feeling content. Next to Leon, Wanda and Natasha were flipping through a manual Hank had brought. "Where did you go?" Natasha asked casually, glancing at him. Leon took a sip of his drink, his eyes on the TV. "Just went for a walk," he replied nonchalantly. Suddenly, something on the news caught his attention. He raised an eyebrow at what the female host was saying. "Dreykov is dead." Natasha and Wanda immediately turned their heads to the TV. The news anchor was reporting on a car explosion in Brazil. Dreykov, a wealthy man, had just closed a deal with another industrial magnate when the explosion killed him and his bodyguard yesterday afternoon. "Finally, he's dead," Sergei, who was sitting on the nearby sofa, muttered while scrolling through his phone, not particularly invested in the news. Natasha's expression grew complicated. The man responsible for her traumatic childhood was gone. Was she happy? Relieved? Perhaps a little of both. And even that was because she caused his end. Wanda, always observant, sensed Natasha's inner conflict. She leaned over and said softly, "If you need to go see for yourself, we're your family. We'll be with you." "Maybe, I'll do that," Natasha responded, exhaling a quiet sigh. Join Patreon for additional chapters. Patreon.com, GreekGreenGlass, Chapter 8, Chapter 40 to Chapter 43. Winter in the Urals is long, with snow covering the ground for much of the year. During this time, as Leon focused on raising his family, he began to think about when they should leave their hidden life. After several years of laying low, both Leon and his family had grown significantly in strength and numbers. Aside from Clarice and Lady Deathstrike, Yuriko Oyama, everyone else, including the youngest, Alina, had mastered the breathing techniques to a competent level. Additionally, the two types of hockey, observation and armament, were now used proficiently by most of them. In short, they were strong enough to handle nearly any threat the world might throw at them. However, Leon never considered Sky Blade as a place to settle. While it boasted a wormhole function and an elegant environment, Sky Blade was his ace, his hidden trump card. Exposing it by letting Wanda and the others live there was too risky. His cautious nature had allowed him to endure the isolation of the mountains for several years. He knew the immense power of Sky Blade was far too dangerous to flaunt, and he couldn't afford to attract the attention it would bring. "I would have to be bit by a rabid dog to make that sort of stupid decision." So, on this day, Leon gathered his entire family together to discuss something important, the idea of leaving the Ural Mountains and re-engaging with society. To his surprise, instead of excitement, everyone exchanged uncertain glances. The room fell silent. Curious, Leon picked up little Alina and asked for her thoughts. "I want to stay with you," she replied softly, tears building up. "I don't want to be separated." In that moment, Leon understood. Everyone had misunderstood his intention. With a tick mark on his forehead, he clarified, "I never said we were going to split up. I just meant we should leave here and reconnect with society. We can still keep this place as our base." He continued, "We have a plane, and Clarice's abilities let us travel easily. You've all been training hard for years, but it's also important to have contact with people outside." Leon's goal had always been to ensure the safety of his family. Now that they were secure, he felt it was time for the next step. Most of them were still young, only around 17, still in the age of making friends, exploring life, maybe even finding romance. He didn't want to keep them tethered to him forever. Like baby birds, they would have to leave the nest eventually, learn to fly, meet new people, and experience life to truly grow. "Oh, that's fine then," everyone said, their heavy expressions quickly lightening up once they realized Leon wasn't talking about splitting up. Hee. Alina made a cute face, biting her tongue out and smacking herself lightly on her head. With the misunderstanding cleared up, the group began eagerly discussing possible places to settle. Some suggested Brazil, or Greece, while others leaned toward the United States. No one mentioned Russia or other Eastern European countries. After all, they were looking for a better environment, and many places in Eastern Europe were still poor, underdeveloped, or even war-torn. Compared to Eastern Europe, Western countries offered a more comfortable life, especially for those with money. The United States, being the world's most developed economy and military power, was an attractive option. It was, after all, a paradise for the wealthy. Some even joked about how it wouldn't be a burden to cause trouble in the US, as they harbored no affection for it. The only debate left was which city to choose. Some favored Chicago, others New York or Los Angeles, but all the options were among the biggest and most well-known cities in the US. Since they could easily travel back and forth with Clarice's special abilities and their fighter plane, everyone figured they could settle wherever they wanted without any trouble. Wanda, Pietro, Leon, Sergei, Natasha, Yuriko, and the 4 children decided to move to New York. Meanwhile, Gennady, Sumarokov, and Loman Losov chose to settle in Chicago, and the rest went to Los Angeles, spreading everyone out across the US to maintain a balance. Getting everyone enrolled in schools wasn't an issue, as they had all kept up with their studies over the past few years. With some money and the right connections, getting green cards was also handled without much trouble. Leon bought a property on Long Island, New York, for $80 million. The 70-acre estate boasted a vast green space and was completely private, offering world-class fitness facilities and a beautifully designed landscape. It included an 8,000-square-foot horse farm with both indoor and outdoor riding arenas, fenced small horse farms, and a large pasture with a viewing platform. In addition to the horse facilities, there was a swimming pool with a jacuzzi, an outdoor kitchen, an indoor basketball court, and a barn-wood indoor theater. The main house, a perfect blend of traditional and modern design, covered 9,000 square feet across 2 floors, plus over 4,000 square feet of underground living space. It featured 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 5 fireplaces, and beautiful woodwork throughout. The second-floor outdoor deck provided a stunning view of the pool and rolling green lawns. The main house, designed in a colonial style, has a subtle elegance, its understated exterior hinting at a quiet luxury. It's the kind of home that reflects the true lifestyle of the ultra-wealthy. On the day Leon moved in with the Maximoff twins and the others, the excitement was palpable. The expansive grassland surrounding the estate offered plenty of space for helicopters and planes to take off at any time. The Maximoff twins and the 4 children spent the entire day exploring every corner of the vast manor. In this affluent neighborhood, paying the right property fees guarantees top-tier security. A professional security team was hired to guard the perimeter of the estate, ensuring complete protection from intrusions. The cost? Expensive, but Leon didn't mind. He was rich. Additionally, the Maid and Housekeeper Association provided a team of well-trained maids and butlers, offering impeccable service. Leon could even customize the length of their contracts to suit his needs. With everything settled, Leon and the others began their new life in New York. Whoever said money can't buy happiness was surely one jealous son of a bitch. The sun shone brightly over the manor, its warm rays bathing everything in golden light. By the outdoor pool, Leon lay back on a sun lounger, dressed casually in a plaid shirt and shorts, soaking in the sun while browsing something on his laptop. Nearby, the cheerful sounds of the 4 kids splashing around in the pool filled the air. Pietro, off in the distance, was enjoying himself at the horse track, while Wanda and Natasha, both in swimsuits, approached with plates of food. Wanda placed the plates on a nearby table, and Natasha settled into the lounge chair beside Leon, teasing him. "Hey, rich man, why aren't you swimming?" Leon smiled, glancing at her. "Because I found something interesting." Natasha raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh, what could possibly grab your attention?" Leon turned his laptop towards Natasha and Wanda. On the screen was a breaking news headline: Tony Stark, CEO of Stark Industries, the genius, billionaire, playboy, and philanthropist, has been kidnapped. "That playboy? You're actually paying attention to someone like him?" Natasha asked, clearly curious. Tony Stark was well known, more for his flamboyant style and public image than for just being wealthy. It didn't seem like someone like Leon, with his practical mindset, would care about Stark at all. Leon shrugged. "Maybe it's just boredom." Natasha seemed skeptical, but Wanda, with a cold tone, chimed in. "That bastard deserves to be kidnapped. He should be killed." In the years since Leon had taken them in, both Wanda and Pietro had found a sense of belonging, and their deep hatred had eased. But that didn't mean it had disappeared entirely. Their bitterness toward Tony Stark still lingered. Tony's arms had devastated their homeland, and now, as they settled into New York, Wanda had been thinking about revenge. Finding out her enemy had been kidnapped right as she arrived felt like some sort of twisted irony, leaving her more frustrated than satisfied. Leon didn't try to stop Wanda or Pietro from harboring their grudge. After all, while Tony Stark would eventually become Iron Man and redeem himself as a hero, he was far from innocent. As the chief beneficiary and inventor of countless weapons, Stark had directly and indirectly caused untold suffering. Families had been torn apart, and children, like the Maximoff twins, were left orphaned and displaced. Redemption may come in the future for the prodigal son, but as far as Wanda and Pietro were concerned, it hadn't arrived yet. Their desire for revenge was only natural. Leon had no reason to stop it. Honestly, he thought Tony was lucky. If he had not been kidnapped and crossed paths with the current versions of Wanda and Pietro, Tony's chances of survival would have been slim. The twins were now super-enhanced, far beyond what they'd once been. Their physical prowess alone could promote the rapid growth of their abilities. Pietro could move at the speed of sound or faster, and Wanda, with chaos magic in one hand and powerful hockey in the other, was far stronger. Together, they were an unstoppable force. Leon couldn't imagine how Tony would survive an encounter with them. He didn't think even Tony's advanced Mark II armor would stand a chance against the twins. They had become something like natural disaster, one that a normal human could do nothing about. But Leon didn't dwell too long on Tony's situation. It wasn't something he or Natasha talked about much. As they lay sunbathing by the pool, a comfortable silence settled between them. After a while, Natasha suddenly spoke up. "Leon, I want to find my sister." "It's about time," Leon replied lazily, barely looking up. "I just don't know how to face her," Natasha admitted, her voice tinged with bitterness. The past between her and her sister was complicated. She had run away from that family, from Yelena. Now, with Dreykov gone and her past behind her, Natasha felt ready to face the unresolved tension between them. There was a knot in her heart she needed to untangle. Leon glanced at her, noting the mix of emotions on her delicate face. He spoke gently. "You can't run from this forever, Natasha." "I know," Natasha nodded, lying back on the recliner as she gazed up at the clear blue sky, her eyes distant and unfocused. She seemed lost in thought, her mind wandering to places unknown. The sound of the 4 kids laughing and splashing in the pool filled the air, mingling with the faint neighing of horses from the nearby pasture. Birds chirped in the forest, their calls crisp and melodic. The peacefulness of it all made everything feel dreamlike, almost lulling her into sleep. After what felt like an eternity of silence, Natasha suddenly stood up. With graceful steps, she began walking away, her figure slowly disappearing into the distance. Just as she was about to be out of sight, she called back, her voice floating through the air, "I've requisitioned the plane. I'll be gone a few days. Enjoy yourself, Natasha," Leon called after her. "Maybe," she replied, her voice fading as she disappeared into the manor house. Minutes later, the sound of an aircraft engine roared in the distance. A black jet lifted off, its engines glowing with fiery intensity before it slowly ascended into the sky, vanishing from sight. I actually wish I could see how that plays out, Wanda said quietly as she lay on the recliner beside Leon. Then why didn't you go with her? Leon asked. Natasha wouldn't want us tagging along, Wanda responded with a hint of frustration. Or maybe you're just waiting for news that Tony's dead, Leon suggested, challenging her. Wanda didn't deny it. Instead, she nodded slightly, her voice cold. Yeah, I'm waiting for that damn arms dealer to go to hell. If he comes back alive, I'll kill him myself, Wanda muttered darkly. Then you'll have to wait, Leon replied with a tone that carried a deeper meaning. Wanda felt something off in his words, but she didn't push it. Instead, she let out a couple of frustrated sighs and then, feeling the warmth of the sun and the peacefulness of the moment, drifted off to sleep. Sophia. The sun shone brightly over the city, illuminating the vibrant streets and casting a warm glow over the scene. Everywhere you looked, streets, alleys, squares, and parks were hidden beneath a canopy of greenery. Rows of linden trees, Arabic rubber trees, French plane trees, and Canadian poplars lined the roads, perfectly arranged. Bright flowerbeds and well-kept lawns adorned every corner of the city. In front of every house, under windows, and both in front and behind homes, flowers and plants bloomed in abundance. The scent of flowers filled the air, carried from the many shops that sold a variety of blooms along the streets. The whole city felt like a blossoming garden, with white and light yellow houses adding to its elegant charm. On one bustling street, construction was underway on houses, with shops offering a dazzling array of goods, and the streets were filled with laughter and the hum of people going about their day. Among the 4 or 5-story yellow brick buildings, one stood out in the middle of the street. Outside a house on the top floor, a woman with ash blonde hair and a black leather jacket unlocked the door. She casually tossed her motorcycle helmet onto the table by the entrance. As soon as she stepped inside, her eyes sharpened, instantly alert. Her entire demeanor shifted. Her body tensed, slightly hunched forward as she swiftly pulled a Glock 17 from the small of her back. Holding the gun in both hands, she assumed a textbook combat stance, moving cautiously and quietly as she began to sweep through the house. She checked her bedroom, the kitchen, and the bathroom, nothing out of the ordinary. Only the living room and balcony remained. A fierce glint flickered across her sharp features. Pressing her body against the wall, she pulled out a compact makeup mirror, carefully extending it just enough to survey the living room without exposing herself. The room appeared empty, no one was there. Still cautious, she sidestepped into the living room, angling herself perfectly to avoid any potential sniper fire from the balcony. She moved toward a locker with a coded lock, quickly punching in the numbers. From inside, she retrieved several pieces of equipment. Gun in her right hand, tactical grenade in her left, she advanced toward the balcony. The wind whipped the curtains, sending them fluttering wildly. Leaning slightly, she peeked around the corner, careful to maintain cover. No one was there. One final check her side of the balcony. With a sudden motion, she whipped open the curtain and aimed her gun. Nothing. Where had they gone? Her brow furrowed in confusion. Could it have been a thief? Just as her guard began to drop, a raspy voice sounded behind her. Seems like you haven't lost your edge, Yelena. Yelena's eyes widened in shock. She spun around, aiming at the source of the voice, but before she could react, her pistol was effortlessly snatched away by a powerful hand. The cold barrel of the gun pressed firmly against Yelena's forehead. The person holding it towered over her by half a head, dressed in a red coat, sweatpants, and white sneakers. Burgundy hair cascaded from the temples to the chest. Yelena's expression shifted when she recognized the familiar face. Her eyes grew fiercer. Natasha, you finally showed up. It was Natasha, her sister, who had been searching for her. Natasha smirked slightly, her red lips curling upward. You don't seem too happy to see me. Oh, trust me, I've never been happier, Yelena replied, her eyes blazing with intensity. As soon as she spoke, she jerked her head sharply, attempting to grab the gun with her right hand. But Natasha was ready. She pulled her arm back just enough to evade Yelena's grasp, keeping the gun aimed at her sister's forehead. Yelena, moving like a swift cheetah, sidestepped the gun's aim while closing the distance between them. In one smooth motion, she drew a dagger from the sheath on her thigh. The two sisters clashed in a fierce, silent struggle that lasted less than 10 seconds. Close quarters combat, joint locks, grappling, dagger strikes, and kicks were all exchanged in rapid succession. Each movement was calculated, every dodge and counter potentially deadly. One mistake, and either sister could have found herself in a desperate situation. Yelena's attacks were relentless and fast. She fought with a desperate edge, willing to risk injury in exchange for a chance to land a fatal blow with her dagger. However, Natasha's combat experience, especially against Yelena, was unmatched. What Yelena hadn't anticipated was that Natasha's physical abilities had improved dramatically over the years. Her reflexes were now beyond that of an ordinary person. With every strike, Yelena became more and more shocked. All of her desperate attempts were effortlessly countered by Natasha, and several times she found herself nearly trapped, her life in danger. As a fellow Black Widow, Yelena carried a deep dissatisfaction with Natasha. She didn't see herself as any less capable and, driven by both pride and personal reasons, wanted to prove she was just as strong, if not stronger. Yet, as the confrontation unfolded, she realized the stark difference in skill between them. Natasha could have easily subdued or even killed Yelena at multiple points, but she didn't. Instead, she countered Yelena's attacks with a calculated ease that felt more like teasing, which only infuriated Yelena further. Just as Yelena began contemplating a desperate move to finish the fight, Natasha seemed to anticipate her thoughts. With a knowing smirk, Natasha's speed and strength suddenly overwhelmed Yelena. Before Yelena could even react, Natasha knocked the dagger from her hand with a swift motion and disarmed her of the grenade she held. In an instant, the muzzle of Natasha's Glock was once again aimed between Yelena's eyes, leaving her frozen in place. Yelena gasped, her voice laced with disbelief. This level of power and speed was beyond anything she had imagined. Natasha, the strongest of the Black Widows, had always been formidable, but this was something else entirely. Natasha shrugged slightly. A little sister will always be a little sister. The double meaning in her words made Yelena grit her teeth in frustration. Natasha finally lowered her gun and smirked. Not bad. You've made a lot of progress. Humph. Yelena scoffed, saying nothing, but inwardly, she couldn't stop thinking about Natasha's extraordinary strength and speed. How did she get so strong? After the tension between them eased, Yelena temporarily abandoned the thought of confronting Natasha. She was more intrigued by how her sister had transformed so dramatically in just a few years, as if she had become a completely different person. Natasha had once been a ruthless spy, skilled in deception, with blood on her hands. But now, to Yelena, she seemed like a sunflower in full bloom, warmer, more compassionate, with a tenderness in her eyes that made Yelena uneasy. Yelena couldn't fathom what Natasha had gone through to bring about such an extraordinary change in both her strength and her demeanor. Did you have something to do with what happened to Dreykov, Natasha? Yelena asked, cutting straight to the point. More than a year ago, Dreykov had unexpectedly disbanded the Red Room and spent enormous sums to help the trained Black Widows return to their homes. Yelena had been one of them. But Yelena had sensed something was off. Natasha's defection and Dreykov's increasingly erratic behavior had led her to believe it was all part of another conspiracy. Unable to trust the situation, Yelena fled, eventually settling down temporarily while she investigated Dreykov's strange actions. Unexpectedly, not long ago, Dreykov had died in a mysterious explosion. The circumstances were so unusual that Yelena couldn't wrap her mind around what had truly happened. But now, with Natasha's sudden appearance and her noticeably enhanced physical abilities, Yelena's sharp mind quickly connected the dots. Natasha didn't deny it. She hummed, before adding, but his death had nothing to do with me. It's a pity he didn't die by my hand. Yelena frowned, her gaze piercing. So, it seems your life is much better than I imagined. Indeed, Natasha admitted with a light smile. But you didn't come to find me until now. Yelena's voice dripped with dissatisfaction and resentment. Natasha sighed, clearly troubled. Yelena, you know, before she could finish, Natasha suddenly turned her head toward the balcony, her instincts flaring. Without warning, she grabbed Yelena and pulled her aside. In the next instant, a black arrow zipped through the air, narrowly missing them and embedding itself in the opposite wall. Beep, beep, beep. A series of beeps came from the small gap between the star-like metal parts of the arrow, signaling that it was about to explode. Natasha and Yelena realized the imminent danger at once. In perfect sync, Yelena and Natasha sprinted toward the balcony, leaping off just as the explosion ripped through the living room behind them. Boom. The blast sent a massive shockwave through the building, flames erupting as the explosion reverberated through the neighborhood, sending pedestrians below into a frenzy of alarmed screams. As they fell from 4 or 5 stories high, Yelena quickly pulled out her grappling gun, aiming it at the wall above. She fired, and the black hook secured itself to the 3rd-floor wall, halting her fall. Instinctively, she glanced at Natasha, expecting her to do the same only to see Natasha plummeting freely toward the ground. Yelena's eyes widened in panic, her hand reaching out, but Natasha was already out of reach. To her astonishment, Natasha performed a graceful mid-air flip, landing firmly on her feet. She absorbed the impact with barely a bend in her knees, unfazed. Yelena descended slowly using her grappling hook, landing beside Natasha with a bemused sigh. So, you're secretly a superwoman in a blue suit who can fly, huh? When were you planning to show me the big S on your chest? Natasha shot her a playful look, glancing across the street as if unfazed by the chaos they'd just escaped. Natasha immediately activated her observation hotkey. Instantly, the world around her seemed to slow down. 2 streets away, she sensed a powerful malice, a presence far stronger than most, even stronger than Yelena. Hey, we gotta go, Yelena urged, tugging on Natasha's sleeve. But Natasha shook her head, glancing at the curious crowd gathering around them. She whispered, there's only one person out there. Follow me. Without waiting, Natasha dashed toward a narrow alley. Yelena, reluctant but trusting, gritted her teeth and followed close behind. Despite Yelena's intense training and impressive speed, which could rival that of an Olympic sprinter, she struggled to keep up with Natasha. They weaved through alleyways, cutting across streets, dodging bystanders and pushing through crowds. Natasha was focused, her senses locked onto the figure moving rapidly through the area. The more Yelena ran, the more frustrated she became. No matter how hard she pushed herself, Natasha seemed untouchable, always a step ahead. Has this woman mutated or something? Yelena muttered under her breath, embarrassed by how easily Natasha was outpacing her. Their high-speed chase through the crowded neighborhood drew attention from pedestrians, many of whom stared in surprise at the two women darting through the streets. They alarmed many people, especially the man being chased. However, the man was no ordinary target. Dressed in tactical gear, with a quiver slung across his back and a sleek black composite bow in hand, he moved across rooftops with the precision of a parkour expert. He followed a carefully planned escape route, leaping from one building to another. After a few minutes of running, he vaulted over the edge of a 4-story building, grabbing onto the metal fire escape attached to the wall, and descended quickly to the alley below. A motorcycle, prepped and waiting, stood at the ready. He reached it and started the engine, but just as he was about to speed away, he felt a sharp gust of wind behind him. His instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he ducked, then rolled off the bike. In one fluid motion, he pulled an arrow from his quiver and aimed, his movements precise and deadly. But he was too late. Before he could release the arrow, a heavy blow slammed into his chest, like being struck by a speeding train. The impact sent him flying. Blood sprayed from his mouth as his body smashed into a wall, rebounding off it before collapsing onto the ground, gasping for air. Chapter 9 Chapter 45 to Chapter 47 Inches Cough. The man lay on the ground, struggling to breathe. The sharp pain in his chest was unbearable. He knew his sternum had cracked, possibly even broken. Gritting his teeth, he reached for a syringe from his tactical belt and injected it into his thigh. The special potion coursed through his veins, temporarily dulling the pain. Slowly, he pushed himself up, looking ahead. There, standing in front of him, was Natasha Romanoff, the target he had been tracking for years. But he hadn't expected this. Her strength, her speed, it all seemed far beyond what he had anticipated. He recalled the arrow he'd shot earlier. The way Natasha had effortlessly dodged it and landed unharmed after falling several floors, something was clearly off. His well-honed instincts screamed danger. As a seasoned agent, he knew when to retreat, but even with all his precautions, she had managed to track him across such a distance. Yelena arrived shortly after, breathing heavily from the chase. She took in the scene, seeing the man struggling to stand while Natasha stood before him, calm and unfazed. "Is he going to kill us?" Yelena asked, her voice steady now that her emotions had calmed. She eyed the man warily. Natasha shook her head. "Maybe just me." Then she turned her attention to him. "So, who are you?" The man remained silent, gripping his compound bow and assuming a stance that indicated he was ready to attack. Yelena instinctively prepared to strike, but Natasha stopped her with a gesture. "Shish." Could tell that this man wasn't just anyone. His gear wasn't the kind an ordinary organization could provide, and a wounded animal was always more dangerous. He might try to take Yelena down to shift the balance. "Your target is me. Do we know each other? Are you from Eastern Europe? Western countries?" Natasha's questions came swiftly, her sharp eyes observing every micro-expression on his face. She listened closely, even to the rhythm of his heartbeat, using her heightened senses. "England, Germany, the US, France." Her interrogation left both the man and Yelena momentarily stunned. Natasha's expertise in reading people, paired with her enhanced abilities, allowed her to detect the subtlest shifts in the man's demeanor. "Are you with a special US intelligence agency? FBI, CIA, Director of National Intelligence, NSA, DIA?" She rattled off the names, carefully observing his reactions. When she mentioned the FBI, the man tried to mask his response, but his breathing and slight twitch gave him away. Natasha shook her head. "No, it's another covert agency, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed as she continued. "Is this about Drakov? Are you targeting me because of him? Were you involved in his death in Eastern Europe?" The man's composure faltered. He didn't need to say anything. Natasha had pieced it together herself, exposing the truth without ever knowing the name of his organization. He could barely contain his frustration as she calmly unraveled his identity. "Fuck," the man muttered under his breath, feeling his composure slip. He hadn't said a word, but the woman in front of him had practically exposed every detail of his identity, all by thinking out loud. She hadn't even needed to know the name of his organization. This woman was a monster. Natasha's lips curled into a half-smile. "I doubt someone as tough as you will answer my next question, right?" she asked, her tone mocking. "So, your best option is to kill me." The man tensed, hearing the deadly calm in her voice. "You're impressive," Natasha added, almost as if she were agreeing with him. "Someone worth appreciating. So, goodbye." And just like that, her aura shifted. The cold, ruthless assassin replaced the woman standing before him a moment ago. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Natasha vanished. The man's sharp, trained senses kicked in, and he immediately registered the shift in the air around him. An ominous gust of wind whistled past his side, but even though he could sense the danger, his body couldn't keep up. He was too slow. A hand clamped around his throat, squeezing with a force that made it impossible for him to breathe. His face flushed red as he frantically reached for his waist, fingers trembling. Just as Natasha was about to crush his windpipe, a sudden beeping sound came from the communicator on the man's chest. A calm, gentle voice broke the tension. "Natasha Romanoff, if you can, give me a minute, and we can talk." Natasha's grip loosened slightly, her brow furrowed, eyes flickering with thought. She considered for a moment she could always kill the man later. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone sharp. "We're from the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division," the voice replied, a note of urgency creeping in. Natasha made sure to remember the name. The voice continued before she could respond. 3 years ago, we learned about a spy named Natasha Romanoff. A female operative involved in numerous assassinations and espionage missions across Eastern Europe. You caused us considerable losses, so we sent agents to apprehend you. Just to arrest me? Natasha's voice dripped with skepticism. Well, there were kill orders too. We wanted to learn more about you, and if possible, recruit you. But when you disappeared, we shifted our focus. We located Drakov and completed his assassination. The voice was surprisingly candid, revealing everything without hesitation. As an expert in psychology, Natasha could easily discern which parts of the story were true and which were exaggerated. She raised an eyebrow. "So?" she prompted, her tone cold. "We're willing to offer compensation for the agent's reckless actions," the voice on the other end said, surprisingly direct. Natasha raised an eyebrow. This organization, usually cold and ruthless, was now offering a compromise. It was unexpected. Her thoughts raced. What was going on? Had they discovered something, or was this a calculated move? "Ms. Romanoff, I believe we don't have to be enemies," the voice added. Natasha wasn't intimidated by the organization, but Yelena's safety was a priority. She loosened her grip, and the man collapsed to the ground, clutching his throat, coughing violently. "Stay out of our lives, don't disturb Yelena or me again," she warned before turning away. Yelena, who had been about to speak, remained silent as they walked away. After Natasha and Yelena left, the man clutched his neck, struggling to stand. He leaned against the wall and pressed the communicator on his chest. "Coulson," he muttered, covering his earpiece. "Barton, are you okay?" Coulson's voice crackled through. "Yeah, I just got beaten up without even putting up a fight," Barton replied with a helpless smile. It was the first time he'd experienced something like this. If other agents found out, they'd never let him live it down. "What's your assessment?" Coulson asked. "The target matches our analysis. Her skills are much better than an average agent's. But this woman, Natasha, she's different from the reports. Her strength and speed are far beyond that of a normal person. I suspect she's either enhanced or, maybe even a mutant." "Maybe. You might have been a bit too hasty this time, Barton," Coulson replied. Coulson's voice came through, calm but serious. This mission was supposed to be a simple contact and capture of Yelena. No one expected Natasha Romanoff, missing for years, to suddenly show up. Barton had initiated an attack, but it had gone beyond the mission's scope. While Barton had the authority to make decisions on the ground, facing 2 Black Widow-level spies was a daunting task, with a high risk of failure. Barton nodded, replying, "I'll report to the director." Then, after a brief pause, he asked, "So, what's the next step?" "The situation's changed. From what we've gathered, Natasha might have made contact with a mysterious force during her disappearance. We don't know much about it yet, but it's far from ordinary. We'll continue investigating and tracking her movements." "Got it." Heading back to HQ to file the report, Barton confirmed. "You won't need to. I'm in the headquarters," Coulson said. "All right." He ended the call, walked over to his damaged motorcycle, righted it, and revved the engine, speeding out of the alley. Unbeknownst to him, Natasha was nearby, hidden just out of view from the street surveillance cameras, silently watching. Her frown deepened as she observed him. A moment later, Yelena approached from the distance, casually holding 2 ice cream sticks. Yelena handed Natasha an ice cream and snapped, "You really don't trust my hiding skills. Barton is an elite agent. You'll get spotted easily," Natasha replied bluntly, taking the ice cream. Her nonchalant response made Yelena even more frustrated. No matter what, in front of Natasha, she always felt like a little girl who hadn't quite grown up. Just as Yelena was about to fire back, Natasha pulled out her phone, entering an encrypted passcode with one hand. Intrigued, Yelena leaned in, pressing her ear against Natasha's without asking, casually licking her ice cream as she listened in. Natasha shot her a look of annoyance, but Yelena wasn't deterred, shamelessly staying put. With no other choice, Natasha allowed her to listen. The call connected quickly, and a calm, magnetic male voice came through the line. "Have you had a good couple of days, Natasha?" Hearing this, Yelena's eyes lit up with curiosity, her face full of gossip. "I found Yelena, but," Natasha began explaining the recent events. There was a brief pause on the other end before the voice replied, "I see. Looks like they've noticed us, but as long as they don't provoke us, we won't pay them any attention." "What are your plans now?" the voice asked. "I want to find Melina," Natasha said after a short pause. Go ahead. We'll support you, Natasha, came the warm reply. Thanks, Natasha responded, her face softening. Yelena's nosy expression grew even more exaggerated. When Natasha finally ended the call, she turned to see Yelena, still licking her ice cream, staring at her with a mischievous, gossip-hungry grin. We can go, Natasha said, irritated, as she headed toward the street. Yelena followed closely behind, chirping away with endless questions. Who was that? Your lover? Yelena teased. I can't believe you've actually fallen for someone. What does he look like? What's his job? Is he just an ordinary guy? You can shut up, Natasha snapped, her patience wearing thin. The two figures gradually faded from sight as they walked down the street. Meanwhile, on the lawn of his estate in Long Island, New York, Leon sat in a chair, placing his phone on the table next to him. His eyes drifted to the four little ones on the grass, deeply engaged in a 1v1 battle. His mind lingered on his recent conversation with Natasha. Keisha, Leon called out. I'm here. What are your orders? Keisha's voice responded instantly. Get inside the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division's headquarters. I need to know what Nick Fury and Coulson are up to. Understood. Intrusion successful. Would you like the virtual screen transmitted? Keisha asked. Transmission, Leon replied. With a quiet whoosh, the scene in front of Leon shifted. Suddenly, it felt as though he was inside an office filled with advanced technology, within the heart of the SHIELD headquarters building. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the office was a one-eyed black man, wearing a black trench coat, his bald head gleaming under the light. Behind him stood a middle-aged man in a suit. The two were in conversation. Director, Barden's mission failed. Natasha Romanoff appeared, showing superhuman speed and strength. Barden suspects she might have undergone an enhancement procedure or possibly awakened mutant abilities, said the middle-aged man. Leon recognized him as the future SHIELD director, Phil Coulson. The bald man was none other than Nick Fury, the current director of SHIELD. Leaning back, Leon sipped his iced juice, listening intently to their conversation. So, she's finally shown herself. Just as I suspected, her disappearance was not a simple matter, Fury responded, turning to look at Coulson, his one eye reflecting deep thought. Director, based on what we know, Natasha Romanoff, though a highly trained operative, shouldn't be capable of this kind of power. Yet, she's showing much more strength than expected after disappearing. Could it be that the organization she's working for has a way to enhance humans? Coulson speculated, his eyes searching Fury's for answers. Perhaps, Fury mused. Remember the Stryker incident? We investigated that base and found those bodies. It wasn't the work of the X-Men. Most of the kills were done with cold weapons, and the victims didn't even have a chance to resist. Instant kills. Fury paused, his voice lowering slightly. And despite our efforts, Xavier's school for gifted youngsters stayed silent. It's clear there's some kind of understanding between them and these new players. Over the past few years, our investigative efforts have only led us to believe that their base is likely somewhere near a few Eastern European countries, Coulson said with a note of frustration. Their ability to stay hidden is beyond anything I imagined. It wasn't just empty words. Coulson knew SHIELD had immense reach, with networks spanning the globe and connections even in the East. Typically, when they set their sights on a person or organization, it didn't take long to uncover the truth. But this mysterious group had left them with nothing, no leads, no trace. At times, Coulson had wondered if his investigation was on the wrong track, or worse, if these people didn't even live on this planet. Perhaps they were hiding at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Now, at least we have a clue, Coulson continued. Natasha might be connected to them. We need to keep monitoring her closely, she could be our way in. Fury nodded. Yes, keep an eye on her. Through her, we may be able to understand these people better. As the global supervisor of supernatural events, Fury's job was to maintain stability, ensuring that the world's balance wasn't disrupted by hidden forces or exposed to the public. His mission was clear: control the chaos from behind the scenes. An organization capable of breaking into the Stryker base in under 10 minutes was naturally under Fury's watchful eye. If this group harbored any ambitions, Fury was prepared to eliminate them at any cost. Yes, sir, Coulson responded before turning to leave. Nick Fury resumed his work, processing documents, unaware that this private conversation was being watched by someone else. Leon had heard everything. As expected, SHIELD has caught on, he thought. Leon knew that the world wasn't short on sharp minds, especially within SHIELD, where agents were like bloodhounds, quick to sniff out even the smallest clues. Despite Leon's best efforts to remain under the radar, any action left some trace. It was inevitable that SHIELD would start to piece things together. However, what Fury and Coulson hadn't realized was that their entire investigation was heading in the wrong direction. They believed they were pursuing a powerful, secretive organization, but in truth, it was just a group of kids, none of them older than 20. The main reason SHIELD's attempts to track them had been so fruitless was because everything had been done with such precision and speed. SHIELD couldn't fathom that such flawless execution could come from a group of teenagers. This misconception stemmed from a fixed mindset. Leon, aided by technology of the angel civilization, was like a modern-day internet god. With the power of advanced technology, he could erase any trace of a person in seconds. Even Tony Stark's cutting-edge AI, Jarvis, had nothing on Leon's tech. The gap between S.H.I.E.L.D.'s capabilities and Leon's technology was evident, leaving S.H.I.E.L.D. chasing shadows. Since S.H.I.E.L.D. had no intention of provoking him, Leon decided not to pay them any more attention. He had already instructed Keisha to make their presence disappear entirely, ensuring that if S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to track them, they would have nowhere to start. Putting S.H.I.E.L.D. aside, Leon turned his focus back to the sign-in system. After 2 years of waiting, he had obtained Sky Blade number 7, a generous reward. Now, he was curious about how the sign-in rewards would evolve over time, whether they would become even better after 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year. By observing the pattern, he could figure out how long it would take to maximize and optimize the system's benefits. But before diving too deep into that, there were other tasks he could take care of. Keisha, search for the Super Soldier Serum formula. Searching, search successful. 138 Super Soldier Serum experimental formulas and related data detected across various locations. No need for details. How long would it take to develop a side effect-free Super Soldier Serum based on human genetics? Please clarify the desired level of enhancement. If you aim for a divine body level, you currently lack a sufficient gene pool, Keisha responded. As far as human limits can go, Leon replied. Using the computing power of Sky Blade number 7, the estimated development time for a fully optimized serum is 1 day, Captain Leon, Keisha responded efficiently. Let's get started, Leon instructed. Understood. Keisha's response made Leon smirk slightly. The thought of Nick Fury came to mind, how easy it was for him to optimize and develop the Super Soldier Serum using a celestial computer as advanced as Sky Blade No. 7. Its computing power, far beyond anything on Earth, made the process more efficient and accurate, a proof of the gap between human technology and the advanced angel civilization. With the Super Soldier Serum in hand, Leon knew he could easily transform Sergei and the others into super soldiers. But then, an idea sparked. Why stop there? The Marvel Universe was filled with powerful races and civilizations, each with unique genetics: angels of the 10th realm, hell lords, dark creatures, vampires, werewolves, and even the Asgardian gods. These could all serve as gene pools, he thought, his mind racing. Even the genes of the Eternals, like Thanos, could be recorded and integrated into Sky Blade number 7's gene pool. And if the Sovereign could create Adam Warlock, Leon could record and fill in that genetic data as well. The possibilities were endless. Even if future sign-in rewards weren't as generous, Sky Blade number 7 would serve as another trump card. If Leon wanted to build his own nation, he couldn't afford to overlook these advantages. The genes of gods and powerful creatures would be the foundation of his strength. The more Leon thought about it, the more excited he became. Suddenly, he stood up from his chair, his mind racing with new ideas. It seems my future plans need to change again, he muttered to himself. A golden light flashed in his eyes. He was determined now. He would create his own nation in power, and Earth would be the first step in his grand vision. In a single-family apartment in Chicago, Gennady and Sumarokov strolled in, laughing, their school bags slung over their shoulders. As they entered the spacious, minimalist-styled apartment, they caught the aroma of something delicious. Instantly, they knew that a friend had beaten them home. Tossing their bags onto the sofa, they headed to the kitchen. Sure enough, there was Loman Losov, wearing an apron and preparing dinner. Gennady casually grabbed a small tomato from a bowl on the counter, popped it into his mouth, and grinned. Man, with that apron, you're definitely gonna charm the girls at school. Sumarokov, trying to maintain a straight face but failing, nodded in agreement. Gennady's right, he said, high-fiving his friend. Loman, busy frying steaks, turned and gave them a helpless look. Instead of teasing me, how about helping out? Unless you guys want to eat in 2 hours. The stronger the body, the bigger the appetite. Height, frame, and muscle mass all play a role. Between the 3 of them, they could easily eat enough for 10 grown men in one meal, which meant a lot of preparation for just one person. Gennady and Sumarokov exchanged smiles and joined in to help with dinner. Thanks to their time in the Ural wooden house villa, where even the little ones learned fine cooking skills, they had mastered the art of preparing a meal efficiently. With all 3 pitching in, dinner was ready in less than an hour. The large dining table in the living room was now filled with dishes: hairy crab, grilled chicken, fried steaks, lamb chops, chicken rolls, and more. They sat down and began eating without hesitation, chatting as they dug into the feast. 2 idiots from the basketball team tried to bully me today, Gennady said between bites. They seemed a little racist. I beat them up after school, but I think they're holding a grudge. I was already thinking about killing them on the spot. Come on, Gennady, Sumarokov, always the calm one, replied. We came to Chicago to study and make connections, not cause trouble. Then he added with a grin, but, as Boss Leon says, if you ever have to kill someone, make sure the police won't trace it back to you. You don't want that messing up your school routine. Gennady chuckled. True. Still, racial discrimination is a problem in Chicago schools. But most of those idiots are just cowards, only brave enough to talk behind your back. Losov nodded in agreement, cutting into his steak. However, anyone who dared to engage in racial discrimination in front of the three of them either had a death wish or some serious issues. With their Eastern European genes, enhanced by nutrient solutions and years of intense training, they were among the largest in their entire family. Each of them stood nearly 1.9 meters tall, with muscles that were impossible to hide. Their hands, stained from countless kills, and the cold, indifferent look in their eyes almost as if they were sizing up a corpse kept most people from daring to cross them. It wasn't often that someone would confront them directly. More often than not, a single glance was enough to silence anyone foolish enough to start trouble. After all, they were just students, and even the most unruly among them had an instinctive fear of those who seemed capable of real violence. Their time living in the mountains had left them a bit out of sync with modern society, yet despite their intimidating presence, the three were quite handsome and masculine. Their physical appeal didn't go unnoticed, especially by the girls at school. Gennady, with his outgoing personality, was particularly popular and had a few close female friends in his class. Naturally, this stirred up jealousy among the male students on the basketball team. But Gennady didn't let the attention inflate his ego, he simply found their jealousy childish. As the three of them were discussing the petty dramas of school, Gennady's phone suddenly rang. He raised an eyebrow and pulled the phone from his belt. "It's Boss Leon," he said, glancing at the screen. The other two exchanged curious looks. After the call connected, Gennady put it on speaker. "Boss Leon," he greeted. Leon's voice came through clearly. "Gennady, are Rokov and Loman with you?" "We're all here, boss." "What's up?" Gennady responded. "Come to the manor tomorrow afternoon. There's work to be done," Leon instructed. "Understood," Gennady replied, his eyes lighting up. The three exchanged excited glances, their faces full of joy. While they enjoyed the peaceful routine of school life, the thrill of battle, blood pumping, adrenaline rushing was what they craved most. The idea of action made their hearts race. "Perfect. I've got 2 days off," Gennady said with a grin. Once the call ended, the trio buzzed with energy. After finishing dinner and cleaning up, they immediately started booking their flights to New York. The next afternoon, at Long Island Manor, the sky was overcast with light rain. The family members, who had been scattered, were all gathered back at the manor. Sitting on the comfortable sofas, eating fruit and sipping drinks, they shared stories about their time at school. Though they stood out a bit, each of them was finding ways to adapt and fit in with campus life. As for the 4 little ones, they had also started attending a private school nearby. It was pretty popular. At that moment, Leon walked in through the door, dressed in a crisp white shirt and carrying a metal box. The once lively atmosphere in the living room instantly quieted down as all eyes turned toward him. Smiling slightly at the group, Leon spoke. "Good, everyone's here except Natasha." With that, he placed the metal box on the table and opened it, revealing more than a dozen syringes neatly packed inside soft plastic compartments. "This is the super soldier serum, specially made for all of you. So, who wants to go first?" A collective murmur of uncertainty filled the room. Despite their extraordinary abilities, they were still teenagers at heart, and the sight of those long syringes made them uneasy. There was something about needles that even they instinctively disliked. It brought back the memories of their painful lives in the Hydra base. But it was an order from Boss Leon, and none of them would dare refuse. Reluctantly, they each grabbed a syringe and injected the serum into their arms, grateful, at least, that the shot wasn't going anywhere near their backsides. You can join Patreon for additional chapters. Patreon.com, GreekGreenGlass. Chapter 10, Chapter 48 to Chapter 51. Bang. On the private beach, a deafening crack echoed in all directions as Sergei's armament hockey-coated fist collided with Leon's arm. The sheer force of the punch sent rainwater flying outward, forming a wide, empty circle in the storm. The ground beneath them caved in, and sand and gravel erupted in all directions. Boom, boom, boom. Sergei breathed heavily as he unleashed a flurry of attacks around Leon, his speed now far greater than before. The rhythmic power of his perfectly sculpted muscles under his vest made each strike seem even more forceful. The speed at which Sergei and Leon fought was too fast for the naked eye to follow. All that could be seen were the shockwaves from their punches and kicks colliding, and the craters that kept forming on the beach as they moved. Nearby, spectators could clearly see the intense battle. Gennady and the Wanda twins followed the movement of the fighters with their eyes, tracking their every move. In contrast, the 4 younger ones struggled to keep up with the action, particularly Clarice. The youngest among them hadn't yet been injected with the super soldier serum due to their age, making it even harder for them to follow the high-speed fight. They had to wait until they were 15 or 16 years old, when their bones had fully developed, before they could be injected with the serum. "Wow, Sergei's attacks are incredibly fast, as fierce as fire," Pietro remarked, watching the battle in awe. Without his own speed abilities, the gap between his combat effectiveness and Sergei's would be enormous. Wanda, standing beside him, nodded slightly. "The super soldier serum has greatly enhanced our physical abilities. Sergei is gradually adjusting to his body through combat, and his speed is quickly approaching subsonic, maybe even sonic levels." The sheer power of moving at such speeds was terrifying. At the speed of sound, the impact on the surrounding environment would be far more destructive than a grenade. For ordinary people nearby, the shockwave alone could shatter internal organs and bones, and a direct hit would reduce them to pulp in an instant. Yet, Wanda observed that Sergei could control this power with ease, which was unusual. Boom! Leon suddenly unleashed a sweeping kick, and with terrifying force, he sent the charging Sergei flying. Sergei struggled to halt his momentum, skidding across the sand for dozens of meters, leaving a deep trail. As Sergei regained his stance and prepared to attack again, Leon disappeared from in front of him. His observation hockey detected Leon's presence behind him just as Leon's voice came from close by. "Alright, that's enough." Sergei's tense muscles relaxed immediately. Turning around, Sergei saw Leon standing there with his hands in his pockets. His eyes gleamed like spring stars, and his nose was sharp and refined. The sea breeze gently ruffled the hem of high, pristine white shirt, untouched by dirt. His rain-soaked muscles peeked through the fabric, giving him a striking appearance. Wanda's face flushed as she looked at him, unable to suppress her reaction. There was no denying his appeal. Leon, oblivious to Wanda's expression, turned to the crowd that had gathered around. He gave a nod, confident. Thanks to the advanced celestial computer, Sky Blade number 7, he could accurately gauge everyone's physical condition. With a force output of 125 tons, your potential should reach around 500 tons. And with your current speed nearing the speed of sound, combined with proper technique, these stats can improve even further, he said, impressed. Very nice. The data was staggering. Sergei was essentially a living Superman. With his enhanced physicality, his mastery of his two hockey had also improved. From an earthly perspective, they were among the top powerhouses, a group of human-shaped nuclear weapons. Wanda and the others beamed with excitement, feeling the explosive power coursing through their bodies. As for the origin of the super soldier serum, it was an unspoken rule among them not to ask any questions. If Leon didn't tell them, they naturally wouldn't ask. He led everyone back to the manor. After dismissing the maids, Leon sat in a chair in the living room, looking at the group seated obediently before him. A sense of accomplishment washed over him. Each one of them had been trained by his own hand. Knocking on the table to get their attention, Leon said, "Let's get started. I need you to do something. I want you to capture or eliminate dark creatures around the world, werewolves, vampires, demons, or any other monsters. Let nothing escape from your grasp." "Huh, are there actually creatures like that on Earth?" they asked, visibly surprised. In their view, the existence of mutants made sense, but werewolves, vampires, and demons, those were supposed to be fictional, the stuff of movies and TV shows. Yet, here was Leon implying they were very real. "Of course they exist," Leon said with a smirk. "Hell, heaven, Norse mythology, it's all real." The group was stunned. They exchanged glances, but along with the surprise, Leon could see excitement in their eyes. This reaction was exactly what he had expected. After so many years of training and spending time with Wanda's group, Leon knew them inside and out. They were nothing like ordinary people. Their very genes seemed infused with a spirit of adventure, a thirst for battle, and a desire for an extraordinary life. Even if they managed to blend into society or a campus, they were, at their core, a pride of lions. Leon leaned forward slightly and placed a metal box he had prepared onto the table. Opening it revealed a selection of expertly crafted weapons. Each weapon was made from adamantium, created through Sky Blade No. 7. Their sharpness and durability were unparalleled, verging on mythical in quality. Of course, they didn't contain any magical enhancements. Unfortunately, Sky Blade number 7 lacked the data on the Angel Civilization's flame sword, as well as the materials to construct one. Otherwise, Leon mused, everyone here would be wielding one. Through Sky Blade number 7, they could even channel a star's power and bring forth a heavenly blade judgment. A storm of chaos and bloodshed was on the horizon. But, Natasha and Yelena found themselves headed to a prison. Russia's largest prison, nestled deep in the frigid wilderness of Siberia, was infamous for its isolation. The environment for hundreds of kilometers was brutally harsh, with little more than snow-capped mountains and sparse vegetation. Animals were a rare sight, and supplies could only be delivered by transport helicopters, making this prison one of the most difficult places in Russia to escape from. The sisters came for one reason: to find their old family member, Alexei. He was the only one who knew the location of the person who had once been both mentor and mother to them. But upon arriving, they faced a disagreement. If they wanted Alexei out, it would take more than just a visit. Yelena believed chaos was the key, create enough disorder, and they could break Alexei free. Natasha, however, objected. Unlike Yelena's willingness to act without restraint, Natasha knew the prison housed dangerous criminals. Causing chaos would lead to countless deaths and injuries, something Natasha wanted to avoid at all costs. She wasn't willing to bring harm to innocent people for their mission. Natasha and Yelena stood atop a snow-covered mountain, both clad in white combat uniforms, locked in an argument. Behind them, Hank's sleek black fighter jet sat on the snowy clearing, blending into the icy landscape. Frustrated, Yelena finally snapped, "Then what's your plan? How are we supposed to rescue Alexei from a prison with 4 anti-aircraft guns and 300 heavily armed guards?" Natasha rolled her eyes at her. Maybe stop relying on those Red Room tactics, she replied sarcastically. Then, with a hint of regret, she added, if I had Conqueror's Hockey, I could knock everyone out at once. But I guess I'll need Clarice's help. Yelena's curiosity piqued. Conqueror's Hockey? Is that some kind of super stun grenade? Ignoring her, Natasha pulled a satellite phone from her pocket and dialed a number. After a few rings, a gentle voice answered from the other end. Natasha. Wanda, I need your help. Got it, I'll be there soon, Wanda replied without hesitation. The call ended without any further questions from the other end. Yelena, who had been eavesdropping right next to Natasha, teased, wow, so you've got yourself a secret little lover. I didn't know you were into that. Shut up, Natasha snapped, clearly irritated. Ever since Yelena had realized the vast difference in strength between them, she'd taken every opportunity to be cheeky, often poking fun at Natasha to uncover her secrets. Now, pouting after being scolded, Yelena groaned, rolling her eyes. Just as Yelena was about to let the topic go, the air around them suddenly rippled. A rift seemed to tear open beside her, startling her. Before she could react fully, her instincts kicked in, and she reached for her gun in alarm. From the crack in space, black and purple clouds swirled. Two figures emerged, one tall, one small. The taller one wore a black trench coat and sunglasses, exuding a calm, cool demeanor. The smaller figure, also dressed in a black combat uniform and a tiny trench coat, had sunglasses perched atop her wide eyes, resembling a miniature assassin. It was Wanda and Clarice. Both held their weapons, ready for action. Natasha's eyes widened in surprise. The cold wind howled, but neither Wanda nor Clarice seemed to notice. After all, growing up in places like the Ural Mountains, they were accustomed to such freezing conditions. With their enhanced physical capabilities and resilient bloodlines, they could easily ignore the biting cold. Both Wanda and Clarice were unaffected by the cold. Wanda, with her sunglasses perched coolly on her nose, approached Natasha with the demeanor of a hardened assassin. Who do you want me to kill? She asked, her voice icy. Little Clarice, mimicking her, stood beside her, also striking a serious, silent killer pose. Natasha couldn't help but laugh. Are you two cosplaying? Yelena chimed in, grinning, you girls look so cool. Clarice's face twitched slightly, almost breaking into a laugh, but she managed to hold it back, staying in character. Alright, enough with the act, Wanda. Look over there, Natasha said, covering her forehead as if she had a headache, but clearly amused. She gestured toward the prison below. Seeing Natasha's expression, Wanda finally dropped her tough facade and flashed a sweet smile. The two had a close sisterly bond, and this was just one of their playful moments. Realizing Natasha was getting serious, Wanda turned her gaze toward the prison, confused. Are you planning to destroy this base? But Natasha, you could handle that on your own. Yelena's eyes twitched at the nonchalant comment. The way Wanda said it made it seem like a trivial task, but considering Natasha's strength, Yelena begrudgingly admitted it was probably true. No, I'm here to rescue someone, Natasha explained. Got it, Wanda nodded. Wanda, quick to catch on, understood Natasha's intention immediately. Under Yelena's curious gaze, she calmly walked to the edge of the snow-capped cliff, overlooking the prison below. Taking a gentle breath, her eyes glowed red, and a wave of crimson energy began to swirl around her. Tendrils of red energy extended from her body like silken threads, spreading down toward the prison. In less than 10 seconds, the entire facility was enveloped in her magic. Everyone inside the prison had glazed, vacant expressions. All done, Wanda said, snapping her fingers, completely at ease. Yelena stood in shock. What is that? Natasha ignored her sister's disbelief and simply replied, the person we're looking for is called Alexei. Got it, Wanda said. Within minutes, a large, burly figure emerged from the prison, trudging up the mountain. He was wearing clothes that resembled dirty rags, his face unshaven and haggard. Despite his unkempt appearance, the power in his body was evident. That was way too easy, Yelena muttered, her disbelief growing. Lately, everything seemed to defy what she thought was possible. Natasha smiled, patting her on the shoulder. It's that simple. With a nod, Wanda dispelled the chaos magic, and Alexei's dull eyes slowly regained their focus. When Alexei saw Natasha and Yelena, his eyes widened in shock and then flushed slightly red. Natasha, Yelena, am I dreaming? Alexei never imagined that on such an ordinary day, it would feel like waking from a dream to see his two daughters standing before him. This rugged Eastern European man, tough on the outside but soft on the inside, stepped forward. Despite the disgusted and conflicted looks on Natasha and Yelena's faces, he stretched out his arms and pulled them into a hug. With his large head wedged between theirs, he let out a shaky breath, his voice trembling, even if this is just a dream, I'm happy. Praise God for letting me see you now. Natasha and Yelena were caught off guard by their emotions. But Natasha, ever the practical one, quickly broke free from the bear hug, pushing Alexei away with surprising strength. He stumbled back, a confused look on his face. He glanced down at his arms, caked in mud, and then at Natasha, wondering, did I not eat today? Or has my strength once greater than ordinary men somehow become weaker than my daughters? Alexei stammered, unable to find the words. Natasha rolled her eyes and turned toward Wanda and Clarice, who stood nearby, watching with amusement. She gently patted Clarice's head and said softly, "Thank you, Wanda." Clarice. Hee, Sister Natasha, is that your sister? Oh, she's very nice. The little girl, clearly enjoying being patted on the head, grinned with her big eyes sparkling. She looked curiously at Yelena, clearly fond of her, especially since Yelena had been making funny faces at her just a moment ago. Natasha glanced at Yelena, a complicated expression briefly crossing her face, but she nodded, "Yes, she's my sister, Yelena." Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added, "They're also my family." Wow tilde, Wanda and Clarice responded excitedly, as if they'd figured it out already. They weren't surprised after all, it seemed Natasha had come back for her former family. After confirming it, Natasha turned to the two girls and said, "Wanda, Clarice, why don't you head back first? I'll make something delicious for you later." Okay tilde, Clarice and Wanda agreed happily. Natasha's cooking, especially her desserts, always had a unique and delightful flavor. Clarice waved her hand, opening a portal. Before stepping through, Wanda paused, as if remembering something, and turned to Natasha with a smile. "Go home early, Leon has a surprise waiting for you." Natasha raised her thin eyebrows, intrigued by the mention of a surprise, though the warmth in her heart overpowered her curiosity. She nodded, watching Wanda and Clarice step through the portal, the purple cirrus cloud slowly fading away. "Are they all mutants?" Alexei's voice came from behind. Without turning, Natasha replied, "They're my family." Her tone softened briefly as she walked toward the plane. Alexei and Yelena trailed behind, with Alexei chattering nonstop. "Wow, my dear, you found a new family these past few years. It's wonderful. I just wish I could have seen that heartwarming scene. In fact, I've missed you so much during these 10 years in prison." "Alexei, can't you just shut up?" Yelena interjected, her tone dry. "Ah, Yelena, that's so harsh. You should know I've had many dreams, and most of them were about you." "Honestly, that's not sweet, it's creepy." "Impossible. My Yelena could never hate me. Isn't that right, Natasha?" Their conversation grew fainter as they climbed the snow-covered mountains, until the plane took off vertically and disappeared into the white clouds. As night fell, the Southside nightclub on Queens Boulevard buzzed with life, its neon lights flickering in the darkness. The night was the perfect veil for all sins. The club, styled like an old warehouse, pulsed with live music, flashing lights, and a sea of people. The restless energy fueled the crowd as they moved, losing themselves in the beat, the flashing lights casting an atmospheric, almost mysterious glow over everything. Under the colorful halos, men and women swayed together, their bodies blending into the rhythm, creating a chaotic, sensual dance that made the space feel like a psychedelic maze. Every corner held a different vibe, with some guests fully absorbed in the moment. But no one realized that tonight would turn into a feast of blood. In the corner of the club, a man dressed in a black trench coat sat quietly on a sofa, a long, wrapped bar lying beside him. He sipped on juice, his eyes fixed on the surging crowd, observing in silence. At 10 o'clock, the atmosphere reached its peak. A loud air raid siren echoed throughout the club, but rather than inciting fear, it fueled the mania. Regulars knew that this signal marked the start of the most intense part of the night. The music was about to hit its hardest. The crowd responded in kind, lifting their arms and twisting their bodies with excitement. Faces gleamed with wild energy, and the room grew even more electric. Suddenly, a woman with a revealing outfit took the stage, her voice cutting through the chaos as she spoke into the microphone. Her slightly shrill tone echoed across the nightclub. "The blood feast is about to begin. Let's enjoy this moment, enjoy life, enjoy blood, enjoy happiness." A strange cheer rose from the crowd as the music reached a new intensity. But the excitement masked the real horror that had already begun to unfold. Men and women, lost in the music, began to notice something eerie. Their dance partners, bathed in the shifting colors of the lights, stared back at them with bloodthirsty eyes, no longer companions in the night, but predators hungry, waiting. At first, a man thought it was just some kind of weird intro to getting laid, but the woman in front of him opened her mouth, revealing sharp, tiger-like teeth. A wave of terror surged through him, his heart racing with fear. Then came the screams. "Fuck, what kind of monster are you? What the hell is going on? Stay away from me." The warm, lively atmosphere of the nightclub evaporated in an instant, replaced by an icy dread. The crowd began to realize that the people they had been dancing with were now wearing bloodthirsty expressions, closing in on them from all sides. Panic spread like wildfire. Faces once flushed with excitement were now twisted with fear. Meanwhile, the man in the black trench coat, still seated in the corner, curled his lips. He adjusted his sunglasses and began to stand. It was time for him to begin the slaughter. But before he could act, a deafening crash erupted from above. The ceiling shattered, sending dust, smoke, and gravel raining down. A figure fell through the wreckage, landing with a thundering impact. As the music hit its climax, the heavy metal's frenetic energy filled the air, radiating a raw, adrenaline-fueled intensity. The guttural roar from the song perfectly matched the rhythm, adding to the electric atmosphere. I came to the river, waiting for midsummer's arrival. The black swans formed a V, walking toward the grave with hope. Through the fiery September sky, engulfed in flames, I beg you to appear, like the dark thoughts of God. The intense, violent sound assaulted everyone's ears, both the innocent nightclub goers and the vampires with their sharp fangs and bloodthirsty eyes. But all their attention was drawn to the dust and smoke, swirling in the center of the dance floor, illuminated by flashing lights that hinted at a figure emerging. As the haze gradually cleared, a tall and imposing figure was revealed. He stood over 1.8 meters, clad in a bright red coat, his muscular frame straining against the vest beneath. His rugged handsome face was framed by the nightclub's chaotic lights, but what captured everyone's attention were his eyes burning like twin suns, fierce and unyielding in the dark of the night. The figure crouched slightly, gripping a gleaming silver cross sword in his right hand. His very presence exuded a crushing sense of power, as if his body were a dormant volcano, ready to erupt at any moment. The vampires surrounding him, creatures of darkness, felt something they hadn't experienced in centuries. Their dead hearts seemed to thrum with life again. What was that sensation? Fear. Real, palpable fear. The vampires couldn't comprehend it. They were the predators, the noble ones who fed on humans. So why were they suddenly afraid of this mere human, this insignificant being of flesh and blood? Yet, the feeling of looming danger weighed heavily on all of them. Without a word, the bloodthirsty crowd ceased their hunt and slowly began to encircle the man. Even the woman at the DJ booth, her aura seething with malevolence, couldn't contain her rage. She grabbed her microphone and shouted, her voice dripping with venom. Who the hell are you? How dare you interrupt the great vampire clan's blood feast? The relentless pulse of the music seemed to irritate the man. His brow furrowed as he stood upright, turning his gaze towards the woman. Boom! That single glance was like a blazing inferno. The heat of his stare burned her to the core, as if it could incinerate her very soul. The pain was unbearable, her once proud and beautiful face twisted in agony, her body trembling uncontrollably. But in that moment, overwhelmed by his power, she dared not utter another word. Her lips quivered as she swallowed the words. She had been about to scream, words that would have ordered the vampires to kill the man. Why couldn't she say them? Why did she feel as if she were standing before an ancient, higher-class vampire, even though he was just a human? Fear surged through her, a sensation that was both foreign and impossible. Who is this man? Her wide eyes were full of terror and disbelief. In that instant, time seemed to freeze. The entire club was silent, with all eyes locked on the man. The terrified patrons, those who had managed to survive the initial chaos, huddled together in a corner, too scared to make a run for it. The only exit was blocked by monsters, vampires, standing guard. Helpless, they pinned their desperate hopes on the stranger, hoping he was their savior. In contrast, a man wearing sunglasses in a black leather trench coat sat casually on a nearby sofa, watching the scene unfold with amusement. He seemed in no hurry, as if he was enjoying the show. As the final beats of the music began to fade, the man's burning gaze finally moved away from the woman on the DJ stage. She felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. Just when she was about to exhale, a sudden, sharp sound erupted behind her, cutting through the lingering silence like a thunderclap. A wave of overwhelming pressure crushed down from behind her. The next moment, the cold edge of a silver cross sword rested gently against her neck. The blade was so sharp that she knew, with the slightest movement, her head would be severed from her body. Her eyes widened in panic, and she stood paralyzed with fear. A single drop of cold sweat slid down her forehead, trembling with the same terror that gripped her heart. She didn't dare move a muscle. She glanced down and noticed the eyes of her companions fixed on something behind her. She wanted to turn and see for herself, but she knew she couldn't. Any movement could mean instant death. The blade of the silver cross sword shifted slightly, grazing her neck. A thin red line appeared on her skin, the sting of the cut sending her heart racing. Then, a calm, male voice spoke from behind her. So, beautiful Miss Vampire, would you mind telling me the location of your vampire headquarters? I'd love to have a pleasant little chat with your friends. Who are you? She stammered, trying to sound threatening. But the man sighed, almost as if disappointed. Old-fashioned threats don't work on me, he replied. How about we make a deal instead? A deal? She asked, her voice shaking. If you tell me where the vampire clan's base camp is, you don't have to die today. Her throat tightened. If I tell you, will you really let me go? Of course, he said smoothly. I wouldn't lie to a pretty girl. That would be terribly ungentlemanly. After a brief hesitation, driven by fear, she caved. It's at Century Tower. She wasn't even a true vampire, just a blood servant. The instinct to survive overpowered her loyalty, and she betrayed the location of the vampire base without hesitation. Whatever happened next, staying alive was her only concern. True to his word, the man lowered the cross sword, stepping back. For a moment, she thought she might actually be free. But before she could fully relax, a gunshot echoed through the club. The woman stared in shock as a gaping blood hole appeared in her chest. A scream of despair escaped her lips before her entire body began to ignite. From the wound, sparks spread quickly, consuming her in flames until she turned to ash. The man didn't seem surprised. Calmly, he shifted his gaze toward the corner of the nightclub, where another burly figure sat. This man, clad in a black trench coat and sunglasses, held up a smoking pistol. It was clear who had fired the shot. Show no mercy to these filthy blood servants. Every one of them deserves to die, the man in sunglasses remarked coldly. Do whatever you want. These weaklings are yours, the first man responded with a hint of indifference. He wasn't angry, just mildly amused, as he glanced at the man with sunglasses, then turned away, gripping his silver cross sword and heading toward the exit. His real target wasn't these low-level servants. The man in sunglasses frowned slightly but said nothing. As the first man approached the door, the blood servants finally reacted. Their eyes, glowing with malice and hunger, locked onto him. They weren't going to let him leave that easily. He sighed, as if annoyed by the inevitable confrontation. Suddenly, his eyes sharpened with a deadly intensity. A wave of terror rippled through the nightclub, freezing everyone in place. Join Patreon for additional chapters. Patreon.com, GreekGreenGlass. Chapter 11 Sorry, had fever so the update was a bit delayed. Chapter 52 to Chapter 56, Woo you you you. A sharp sound pierced the air, making everyone freeze. Both the blood servants and the man in sunglasses were momentarily stunned. What was that sound? Breathing. But what kind of breath could cause such a disruption? What kind of lungs could draw in so much air with such force? In the next moment, it became clear. The man planted his right foot firmly into the ground, and an immense surge of power rippled through his body. His leg tensed, pushing back slightly, and then boom, an explosive force erupted from him. Waves of scorching heat radiated in all directions, sweeping over the room like flames. Even the cold-blooded vampires, normally indifferent to temperature, winced at the sudden, intense heat. Under their stunned and bewildered gazes, the man grinned. He gripped the hilt of his sword with both hands and lifted it high. Boom! A deafening explosion rocked the room as the man transformed into a blazing firestorm, tearing through the nightclub like a dragon. In a matter of seconds, he moved through the tightly packed blood servants, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Scarlet sparks scattered as he reappeared at the entrance behind the blood servants. With a swift motion, he swung the cross sword, sending embers flying. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. Then thud, all the blood servants' heads dropped to the ground simultaneously, and their bodies ignited like kerosene-soaked barrels. The nightclub was filled with screams of despair as the fiery blaze consumed them, turning each one into ash. The once crowded room was now eerily empty. What the hell just happened? The man in sunglasses, who had been prepared to start his own killing spree, was dumbfounded. His usually cold demeanor cracked as disbelief spread across his dark-skinned face. There had been hundreds of blood servants in the nightclub. While they weren't a match for him, they were more than enough to overwhelm ordinary people. It would have taken him time to wipe them all out. Yet, in the blink of an eye, they were all gone. And what was that flame? A mutant, perhaps. For the first time in a long while, the man, Eric Brooks, felt a genuine interest stir within him as he looked at this stranger. As Eric watched the man leave the nightclub, he cracked his neck and decided to follow. He paid no attention to the chaotic screams of the crowd, who had just narrowly escaped death. Outside, the nearby streetlights barely flickered, casting dim shadows over the alley. Eric saw the man preparing to mount. Motorcycle. Approaching him, Eric stumbled a bit and called out, "Hey, are you a vampire hunter?" The man, already seated on his motorcycle with his sword placed carefully beside him, looked over. "No," he replied simply. Under the faint streetlights, Eric could finally get a good look at the man. He was young, neither white nor black, but had distinct Eastern European features. "Sergey," the man introduced himself, extending his hand. "Eric Brooks," Brooks responded, shaking Sergey's hand firmly. Sergey had been sent by Leon. Although he didn't fully understand why Leon needed a blood sample from a real vampire, he wasn't one to ask too many questions. His job was to carry out the mission. Leon had provided them with some basic intel, but they were largely on their own for tracking down the rest, part mission, part experience building. Sergey could tell that Eric, the man in front of him, knew a lot about vampires. "So, what are your next plans?" Eric asked bluntly, his tone direct and to the point. Sergey could sense that Brooks wasn't the best at small talk, but it didn't bother him. He appreciated the straightforwardness, and there was no reason to hide his intentions either. "The woman mentioned the Century Building is the vampire headquarters," Sergey said, his sentence trailing off. Eric's eyes lit up beneath his sunglasses, ready to respond, but before he could speak, Sergey had already revved the engine of his motorcycle. The exhaust roared as Sergey sped down the street, leaving only a parting line. "Good night, Mr. Eric." Watching Sergey disappear into the distance, Eric didn't hesitate. His hatred for vampires flared as he walked over to a classic sports car parked nearby. Starting the engine, he quickly set off in the same direction toward the Century Building. Meanwhile, inside the Century Building, the vampires partied, unaware that death was fast approaching. They reveled in the blood and music, completely oblivious to the disaster headed their way. 10 minutes later, Sergey arrived at the Century Building, located in the northernmost part of the Bronx. The clock struck 10, and the area buzzed with life as people enjoyed the night around the block. Sergei parked his motorcycle on the side of the road, resting one foot on the ground. He looked up at the towering 70 or 80-story building. With his sharp hearing, he could catch the faint sounds of raucous celebration from the top floor. Wang. Without warning, Sergei activated his observation hockey. Instantly, the entire building's auras flooded his mind. He could sense every single presence, each one distinctly human. But then, there were the cold, predatory breaths, those of the vampires. With determination, Sergei dismounted his motorcycle, grabbed his cross sword, and began walking toward the entrance of the building, each step deliberate and measured. The building was luxurious, and naturally, it was guarded. Several armed security guards noticed Sergei approaching with a cross sword in hand. Instantly, their faces turned serious. Drawing their guns, one of them shouted, "Hey! This isn't a place for you. Get out now." As one of the guards reached for his radio to call for backup, a flash of fire appeared in front of his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Sergei, who had been dozens of meters away, vanished. When he reappeared, he was behind them. The guards remained in their original positions, seemingly frozen in time. A faint, fiery red line traced across their necks before they even realized what had happened. Without a sound, their bodies ignited and crumbled to ashes, sparks scattering into the air. These security guards weren't human, they were blood servants. Their guns clattered to the ground, but the surrounding crowds remained oblivious. Unaware of the danger unfolding, no one noticed the deadly encounter. Sergei strode confidently into the building, his cross sword gleaming in his grip. 10 seconds later, the building erupted with the sounds of gunfire and roaring chaos. The nearby blocks were soon filled with alarms as the commotion spread through the area. Enemy invasion. Kill him immediately. Alert the master. The top floor of the Century building was brightly lit even at night. Under the rooftop swimming pool, a group of elegantly dressed women, some in suits, others in revealing dresses and swimsuits, lined up with goblets filled with the fresh blood of 18-year-olds. In the center of the party, a man in a white shirt with an open collar, revealing a tattoo, sat with a beautiful white woman on his lap. The atmosphere was one of luxurious indulgence, a typical blood party for the noble vampire clan. Suddenly, the revelry was shattered by gunshots and explosions, jolting the vampires from their pleasure. Panic spread through the crowd. The tattooed man stood up abruptly and roared to regain control. "Silence! Look at yourselves flustered over such trivial matters. You've lost the elegance and composure of our noble clan." At that moment, hurried footsteps approached, and a vampire in a suit leaned into Reddick and whispered, "Mr. Reddick, the building is under attack. There's only one intruder, but he's incredibly strong. Our blood servant warriors couldn't resist him, he's already made it to the 40th floor." "Who is it? Could it be Blade?" Reddick's shock was evident. How could someone have breached 40 floors so quickly? Was this person even human? Were his blood servants nothing more than helpless victims? "No, from the appearance of the intruder, he seems to be Eastern European," the vampire said, pulling out a tablet. The screen showed real-time surveillance footage. Nearby, several vampire men and women, who were friends of Reddick and belonged to the same social circle, approached. "Reddick, what's going on?" they asked, confused and concerned. Reddick barely acknowledged them, his attention fixed on the surveillance screen. His eyes twitched with anxiety as he watched the footage. What he saw was horrifying. A wave of red flames surged through the stairwell, where blood servants, heavily armed and ready, were trying to defend their position. But each time the flames flashed across the screen, his blood servants turned to ash, their efforts utterly futile. The escape passage was in ruins, the stairs had collapsed, and everything was charred black from the flames. Finally, it dawned on Reddick why the intruder had broken through to the 40th floor at such a terrifying speed. In just a blink, they had already reached the 10th floor. "Damn it, who the hell is this Eastern European bastard?" Reddick muttered, feeling a cold wave of fear wash over him. As a vampire, his senses were several times, even 10 times sharper than those of humans. To him, the speed of bullets leaving a gun's muzzle appeared slowed down by tenfold. With his enhanced physique, dodging firearms was usually child's play. But now, despite these heightened senses, he couldn't even register how fast this intruder was moving. There was no doubt that this individual was far stronger than any of the vampire warriors present. An inexplicable fear gripped his heart. Worse still, the weapons the intruder carried seemed capable of killing vampires. Panic surged within Reddick. He spun around and shouted to his men, "Call in all the vampire warriors. Use every weapon we have to stop him." After a deep breath, he turned to his friends, who were casting him dissatisfied looks. "The party's over. We need to leave, now." A few of them still seemed reluctant to agree, but after seeing the grim expression on Reddick's face, they realized just how dangerous the situation was. Silently, they nodded in agreement. Only then did Reddick's tense expression relax slightly. Under the protection of the vampire warriors, the group made their way up the passage toward the rooftop. A helicopter was waiting for them there. However, just as they reached the stairwell, a red glow illuminated the space ahead. Though no one had appeared yet, the violent, energy felt like a volcanic eruption. The intense heat, like the scorching sun, made all the vampires uneasy. But what truly terrified them was the smell of sulfur and death in the air. Boom! 4 streams of fire exploded at the entrance of the passage, roaring like dragons and engulfing everything in flames. The vampires, frozen in fear, could only stand still. Only the loyal vampire warriors reacted, drawing their guns and pointing them at the figure standing amidst the flames. They opened fire. Ta, ta, ta. Bullets rained down like a heavy storm, but the figure's right hand moved slightly, and with a sharp ding and a shower of sparks, every bullet was deflected with effortless precision. The shooting stopped when the magazines emptied. The vortex of flames dissipated, revealing Sergei. He tilted his head slightly, scanning the faces on the rooftop. His gaze lingered momentarily on the scantily clad women with striking figures. It was hard not to notice after all, no one of average looks would be seen in a place like this. Sergei, still an adolescent, couldn't help but be briefly affected by the scene before him. But the overpowering stench of decay and the coldness in the air quickly made him feel nauseous. In an instant, his flickering gaze steadied. His eyes eventually settled on Reddick and the other vampires surrounded by several vampire warriors. The situation was clear. It led to obvious conclusions. Furthermore, with his heightened senses, Sergei could tell that these vampires were high-ranking members of their clan. "Who are you? Do you know what you're doing?" Reddick, sensing that Sergei hadn't attacked immediately, tried to speak, hoping to negotiate. But Sergei cut him off before he could finish. "I'm not interested in killing you," Sergei said flatly, pulling out a special injection tube from his pocket. "I just need your blood. If you give me a vial, you won't die." His mission was simple: collect blood. He had no real interest in slaughtering vampires unless they crossed a line. His actions were guided by a vague sense of punishing evil and promoting good, depending on his mood. Leon's subtle influence had instilled some moral restraint in him, though it wasn't particularly strong. "Impossible," Reddick hissed, though fear gripped him. The pride of the vampire clan wouldn't allow him to retreat in such a humiliating way, especially with his friends watching. To give in would mean disgrace for the clan, punishment by the council, and possibly even expulsion from his family. A bunch of fools who don't know how to make a choice. Sergei sighed, his expression growing serious as his eyes narrowed. Bang! In an instant, a vortex of fire erupted, and Sergei appeared right in front of Reddick. His imposing presence was overwhelming, leaving Reddick and his companions in stunned silence. They barely had time to react before the vampire warriors around them were reduced to ashes, one after another. Reddick finally moved, his hands morphing into razor-sharp claws as he slashed toward Sergei. But in the blink of an eye, the flash of Sergei's sword cut through the air. A sharp pain shot through Reddick, and he let out an involuntary scream. Ah! Both of his hands, along with his forearms, had been severed cleanly. The wounds were impossibly smooth, leaving Reddick trembling in disbelief. Seeing Sergei's devastating power, the vampires behind Reddick hesitated. Though they gritted their teeth, ready to attack, one cold glance from Sergei froze them in place, paralyzed by fear. They dared not move. Sergei, holding his sword upside down in his right hand, reached into his left pocket and pulled out a syringe, preparing to draw blood from Reddick. But just then, other vampire warriors on the rooftop sprang into action. Fear lingered in their eyes, but their vampire instincts drove them to fight for Reddick. Bang! A bullet cut through the air, aimed at Sergei's temple. He dodged it with a slight tilt of his head, then straightened up, his expression darkening with displeasure. "Seems I shouldn't have tried to take the easy way out," he muttered, his voice low and filled with murderous intent. He returned the syringe to his pocket. With a powerful stomp of his right foot, Sergei vanished in a flash of red fire, the sudden gust of air ruffling Reddick's hair. Sergei had made up his mind he would kill every vampire on the rooftop, delaying his mission, whether man or woman. A scream pierced the air as Sergei charged like a tiger down the mountain, heading straight for the vampire warriors. Though they were terrified, the warriors gritted their teeth, ready for a desperate fight. Slash! A flash of red sword light, and the head of the first vampire warrior was severed, turning into ashes. Without a moment's pause, Sergei rushed toward the second one, who desperately fired his weapon, but Sergei's ghost-like movements easily dodged the bullets. With a swift grip on the vampire's hair, Sergei plunged his sword into the warrior's heart, as cold and final as death itself. He pulled the sword out, ignoring the twitching, burning remains, and advanced toward the next. The death feast had begun. The vampire warriors moved quickly, trying to use their numbers and speed to slow him down, but Sergei's speed was unmatched. His fiery presence left them no chance to escape. Realizing the futility of fleeing, the vampire women screamed and charged at him, desperation in their eyes. But they were merely moths flying into the flames. "Kill him! Tear him apart with our speed and numbers!" They shouted, but their efforts were futile. On the rooftop, it was chaos, figures darting like shadows, bullets and blood flying in all directions. Sergei became a flaming tiger, dragging a long trail of red fire, tearing through the crowd. His flame engulfed both men and women alike, leaving nothing but despair in his wake. In less than 30 seconds, the gunfire, screams, and roars ceased. All that remained were piles of black ash, drifting away on the wind. The luxurious rooftop party had transformed into a scene of pure death. Reddick and the few remaining purebloods stood trembling, their faces twisted in fear. Are you a monster? Reddick stammered, staring at Sergei as he approached. He couldn't believe his eyes. How could anyone possess such terrifying power? That crushing speed and strength, this wasn't something a human should have. Sergei ignored the question. Without wasting time, he stepped up to Reddick, who had completely lost his will to fight. He pulled out a syringe and injected it straight into Reddick's heart. The vampire didn't dare to resist or even speak. Once the syringe filled with blood, Sergei pulled it out, pocketing it swiftly. Looking at the trembling vampires around him, he asked coldly, "Which faction are you from?" We're all affiliated with the Council of Elders, covering the entire Western world," Reddick blurted, sensing the gravity of the question. He immediately mentioned the Elders, hoping to deter Sergei from any rash actions. Sergei seemed intrigued for a moment. The Council of Elders, huh? Impressive. He hesitated, clearly considering his next move. Well, this complicates things, he muttered. His original plan had been simple: wipe out Reddick and his group, but the mention of a powerful faction made him reconsider. He didn't want to kill Reddick, only to have the council come after him for revenge later. It wasn't that he feared them, but Sergei hated unnecessary complications. Still, the name Council of Elders was now firmly etched in Sergei's mind. Boom. Just as Sergei was thinking about how to get information from the terrified Reddick regarding the Council of Elders, heavy footstep echoed from the stairs. A tall, muscular black man with a flat-top haircut, wearing a black trench coat and sunglasses, entered. He had a sword strapped to his back. Eric Brooks had arrived. Reddick and the other vampires immediately recognized him. Fear and hatred filled their eyes as one name raced through their minds. "Blade, you're that damned vampire killer," Reddick shouted. At first, it sounded like a question, but the second half was a clear statement. Blade Eric Brooks had appeared out of nowhere a few years ago. While the vampires called themselves nobles, to Blade, they were nothing more than vampires. His relentless hunting had made him infamous, wiping out entire vampire families with no discrimination between men or women, high-born or low-born. To powerful factions like the Council of Elders, Blade's actions were an annoyance, hardly worth their attention. But for families like Reddick's, big enough to feel the sting, but not powerful enough to retaliate, Blade was a nightmare. Blade looked over the rooftop with indifference, taking in the scene. Bodies turned to ash, the air thick with the smell of burnt flesh, and the luxurious party turned into a battlefield. He glanced at Reddick and the other vampires briefly before turning his gaze to Sergei. The shock in Blade's eyes was undeniable, a rare expression for someone like him. As Blade stood there, his half-vampire nature gave him immense strength and endurance. He was a force to be reckoned with in combat, and over the years, he had cut through vampires like they were nothing more than chickens. But as he observed the destruction around him, the scorched, shattered stairs and the ash of countless vampires, he realized something unsettling. Compared to the man standing before him, he was outmatched. The massacre had happened in mere minutes. Sergei had torn through a fully armed vampire stronghold with terrifying efficiency, leaving nothing but ruin in his wake. Blade knew strength when he saw it, and this guy was on a whole different level. "Cool nickname," Sergei commented, breaking Blade's train of thought. His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge of coldness, his gaze locking on Reddick and the others with murderous intent. Reddick, sensing the impending doom, panicked. His voice cracked as he desperately shouted, "You can't kill me. The leader of the vampire clan won't let you go. When the great vampire god descends, you'll die without a trace." Sergei's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening with curiosity. "Vampire god?" Sergei's eyes gleamed as he raised his right hand, pressing the sharp edge of the cross sword against Reddick's throat. "Tell me more about this, vampire god," he demanded. Vampire god, Blade, standing nearby, looked just as intrigued. He stepped forward, grabbing Reddick by the collar and lifting him off the ground. "Is the vampire god you're talking about the same one I found in the Book of Death? Tell me." His voice was a thunderous roar. Reddick's face twisted in despair, realizing he had let something slip. He knew that even if he survived this encounter, his betrayal of the vampire clan would lead to dire consequences for him and his family. Looking at Blade with hopeless eyes, he muttered, "Sunwalker, you will see the day when the vampire god rises, and you'll die along with the rest." With a last surge of desperation, Reddick and his remaining allies launched a final attack. Blade, quick as ever, dodged effortlessly. Drawing his silver sword, he swept through them with lethal precision. It was as if he were cutting down crops, slicing his enemies in half, their bodies bursting into flames and crumbling to ash. Blade stared coldly at the remains, lost in thought. "Nice job. Good night, Blade," Sergei said with a hint of amusement. Watching Blade finish off Reddick and the others didn't bother him. After a brief look, Sergei turned and casually walked toward the stairs, leaving those words behind. Blade watched Sergei disappear into the stairwell, his eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion beneath his sunglasses. Blade replayed Reddick's final words in his mind, along with the haunted look in his eyes. He had a strong feeling that a conspiracy was unfolding and somehow, he was at the center of it. The Book of the Dead, vampire god. Standing there for a minute, Blade could hear the faint sounds of sirens and helicopters approaching from a few streets away. Deciding it was time to go, he turned and left. On the cobblestone road outside a New York manor, the iron gate opened automatically as Sergei rode his motorcycle up to the house. Parking it outside, he propped it up, casually hanging his helmet on the front. Several maids came to the door, greeting him with respectful bows. Sergei nodded in acknowledgement and walked inside. In the lavish hall, Leon sat on a sofa, focused on something in his notebook. "Boss," Sergei said, taking a seat on the couch next to Leon. A glass of juice had already been prepared for him, and he downed it in one go. After finishing, Sergei pulled the syringe filled with vampire blood from his pocket and handed it to Leon. "All taken care of." Leon, unsurprised by the result, placed the syringe aside and closed his notebook, setting it on the table. Leaning back on the sofa with his legs crossed, he turned to Sergei with a slight smirk. "How did it go?" "Pretty standard," Sergei replied, knowing exactly what Leon was asking. Blood servants are stronger than regular people, with some special abilities. Pure-blooded vampires are on a different level, though. Their senses, strength, and speed are way beyond that of ordinary humans. And if you're not using a weapon made of specific materials, even bullets won't kill them. But that's all there is to it. Sergei paused, thinking. Vampires have impressive individual and group combat abilities, but their bloodline makes them puppets, bound to the will of those above them. It wasn't surprising that these vampires had managed to stay hidden within the human world, operating in the shadows. They blended in well. It was easy to figure out that beyond the vampires' ability to conceal themselves, they likely had helped wealthy businessmen, and possibly even high-ranking government officials. Even if these allies weren't vampires themselves, they were probably connected. After all, the appeal of immortality is undeniable. No matter how powerful or rich someone is, after 100 years, they end up in the same place as everyone else, a pile of dust. It wasn't hard to imagine that people in power would crave a lifespan longer than the average person. So, the vampires throw these rooftop blood parties out in the open, Sergei continued, because they have protection. Powerful people covering for them. He thought of the countless people who go missing or die every year, whether in accidents, murders, or from illnesses. To those in power, it's just data. Just numbers. And if something can become just data, then it can be manipulated. Changing the numbers or covering things up would be easy. But Sergei wasn't particularly concerned about that. He could let the vampires go on as if nothing happened, turning a blind eye. However, if he ever saw a vampire harming innocent people, his conscience might step in. Being compassionate isn't a flaw, but it comes with a heavy price. After all he's been through, Sergei preferred a simpler life. His real concerns were Leon, the Maximoff twins, and their extended family. That's what mattered. To protect his family and avoid future trouble, Sergei had considered hunting down and killing the high-ranking vampires, sending a message to their entire clan. He shared this thought with Leon. Leon, ever calm, waved it off. Do whatever you want. Think of it as an extracurricular activity just to pass the time. Vampires may have a lot of influence and connections, but Leon didn't care about them at all. To him, they were just an insignificant race of undead. If it weren't for their supernatural resilience, even the human government could have wiped them out by now. They're just a nuisance, Leon added. A little practice for you, Sergei. Sergei had a relatively enjoyable evening. After all, the group he had taken down wasn't weak, and that added to his satisfaction. Feeling content, he asked the butler to bring some snacks and fruit. He had a game to finish tonight. Meanwhile, Leon was holding a syringe filled with vampire blood and called Keisha. Keisha, analyze the blood, he instructed. Yes, Captain Leon. Beginning analysis, Keisha responded. The blood contains 317 specific viral combinations. It's not contagious, but it has strong phagocytic and fusion properties, making it highly compatible with human blood. Once infected, transformation occurs within half an hour, with a level of consciousness still under domination. Keisha continued, the blood can transform human bones, internal organs, and enhance sensory capabilities. Extracting a small portion of the genome, the evolutionary process is back calculating, 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, 100%. The most primitive genome has been deduced, an unknown genome with traits of a first-generation divine body and some characteristics of a second-generation divine body. Shall I upload the genome sequence to the database? Keisha asked. Upload, Leon commanded. Upload successful. The Sky Blade No. 7's computer calculated the evolutionary efficiency at a shockingly fast rate. The primitive bloodline of the vampire displayed divine body traits. In comparison to angelic civilization, their divine bodies might be considered lower level, BU. For ordinary races, a divine body was already terrifying. It could even withstand nuclear bomb blasts without harm. Given that an ancestor-level vampire could possess such power, it wasn't entirely surprising. In short, if Leon wanted, he could now use the Sky Blade No. 7 to initiate a genetic modification project, transplanting the genes of the vampire ancestors into humans. But it wasn't worth it. The vampire ancestors were certainly powerful, but only to a point. In the grand scheme of things, compared to the gods and other powerful races in the universe, the vampires' abilities paled in comparison. The upper limits of vampire genes were too low. With so many better options available, why settle for less? It would be like tossing away a watermelon to pick up sesame seeds, a foolish move. However, the vampire genes did have their perks. By collecting genetic material from other mid-tier races, Sky Blade number 7 could deduce new sequences. This time, Leon wouldn't use the top-tier genes for Wanda and her crew, but they could be useful for building an army or training warriors. Too bad Odin wasn't dead yet. If he were, Leon would have had Sky Blade number 7 search for dimensional coordinates to places like Jotunheim and other realms. Those places housed plenty of strong beings and races worth considering. As Leon pondered these thoughts, the sound of playful laughter caught his attention. He turned to see Alina, Polina, and Clarice running into the room, panting from exertion. The three little ones, faces flushed with energy, lined up and stared curiously at Leon and Sergei, their big eyes full of questions. Leon and Sergei couldn't help but smile. "So, what's up?" Leon asked, noticing the beads of sweat on their foreheads. He could tell they'd been running wild, no surprise, given that their stamina far surpassed that of any grown man. But he was more intrigued by their current expressions. What does a vampire look like? Aren't they supposed to be beautiful and elegant? One of them asked, eyes wide. Is it like in the Vampire Diaries? Another chimed in. It turned out the three little ones had recently watched an American TV show about vampires. The show portrayed vampires as living elegant and refined lives, where every vampire was portrayed as handsome and beautiful. So when they heard that Sergei had encountered vampires, their curiosity got the better of them. While playing outside, they overheard the servants talking about Sergei's return, and they rushed back to ask him about it. After all, no matter how precocious they were, little girls still had dreams of a pure and beautiful kind of love, something platonic and romantic. But Sergei wasted no time in crushing their illusions. "Believe me," he said, "it's nothing like that. Behind their so-called refined lives are ugly, dirty, and corrupt hearts." The harsh reality left the three little ones visibly disappointed. Leon, amused, ruffled their hair and added, "Just look at the pictures. No matter how elegant or refined they seem, at the end of the day, vampires are nothing more than blood-sucking bats. When they feed, their true, hideous faces show. Even among themselves, it's all about conspiracies, manipulation, and power plays." Alina pouted, clearly not thrilled with this new information. But then Leon noticed something. "Wait, where's Pushkin? Isn't he usually with you?" Leon asked, raising an eyebrow. Polina huffed in annoyance. "No, he said he's a man now and wants to be strong like you and Sergei. He's decided to train hard and said that he can't waste time playing with us anymore." Pushkin's sudden declaration that he had grown up and needed to focus on becoming a warrior had hurt the three little girls deeply. They had always been inseparable friends, but 2 days ago, Pushkin announced he couldn't play with them anymore, saying it would weaken his fighting spirit. The three little ones had nearly teamed up to beat him up for saying that. "Haha, it seems our little man has finally grown up," Leon chuckled, but when he noticed the dissatisfied looks from the three little ones, he quickly added, "But of course, what he did was a bit ungraceful. A real man shouldn't act that way, and he deserves a little criticism." Leon's right, the three little ones nodded in agreement, feeling vindicated. They weren't necessarily going to scold Pushkin, but in this playful moment, they wanted Leon to show that he was on their side. Even though their illusions had been shattered, the girls were still in high spirits. After all, it wasn't enough to ruin their good mood. They dashed to the refrigerator, grabbed a big ice cream cake, and ran back out, full of energy. Their joyful shouts filled the manor with life and laughter. As Leon leaned back on the sofa, watching them with a fond smile, his heart brimmed with affection for the three little ones.